Thank you so much for making it to our inaugural Mentoria Fireside Chat on this day. I know being a public holiday, we didn't know who'd make it, who'd not, but I'm so glad we have a quorum to begin. The concept behind the Mentoria Fireside Chat is to deepen debates on important issues, economic issues, policy issues. For far too long, Kenya's politics, for example, has been personality-based. But what we are hearing from Gen Zs moving forward is we want to have issue-based politics. So we want to deepen issue-based politics, whether it's on the economy or politics or education or healthcare. So this is a pilot which we hope will lead into bigger things as we move on. So thank you so much. Obviously, we are meeting at a very sad time. We've lost the Right Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, a big, big blow to the country. I can't think of anybody who has contributed more to the freedoms we enjoy today than him. So we, together, and at the heart of our session today, will be to tribute him, to give him a tribute for giving us his space, this democratic space, this new constitution that we can enjoy. We can disagree, we can agree to disagree, and still go home in one piece. I don't think for many people who've gone across Africa, that's possible in many parts of Africa. So we are grateful for that, and that will be a recurring theme in our conversation today. Perhaps I can also say that today's focus will be on Kenya-India relationship. This is a relationship that goes back way over a century, and we'll be unpacking very many issues, not just economic, but also healthcare at the heart of it. So many Kenyans are going there for treatment, so we'll unpack much of that. So, and we also look forward to your questions. I know many of you have told me you're in business, you're in academia, you're in international relations. So as the panelists unpack, feel free to come up with a question or two. Then we'll have a Q&A session to be able to unpack your questions. I'm very happy to have a very illustrious panel here. I don't take it for granted to have a very high-profile panel. I'll start with Dismas Mokua. I'm sure if you watch TV, you'll see Dismas Mokua on TV every week. He's an expert in political risk. He unpacks policies from various perspectives, and I'll allow him to say one word or two. Dismas.
One word or two.
Come on.
And I'm kidding. My name is Dismas Mokua. I'm very delighted to be here. These two gentlemen here, they're Ivy League graduates, so they're a bit of a threat. In preparation, I did 100 press-ups. I've taken a lot of coffee, and I've also taken Red Bull to give me the guts to survive. I hope I'll manage. But I'm very happy. The fact that we are here, it means that you have intellectual curiosity, and that is what you need to succeed in life. Yeah, most of your contemporaries right now are yawning away, but I'm very delighted that you are here because that is how we are going to make progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Dismas. We also have George Waithaka. George Waithaka is a graduate of MIT, a seasoned financial analyst. If you ever do any form of financial analysis or modeling, he's your go-to guy. Allow him to say a word or two.
Yeah, morning everyone. As you've heard, my name is George Waithaka, a financial analyst, and I'm looking forward for the conversations today. Thank you.
Great. Then our panel, our moderator, he needs no introduction, one and only Dennis Okari, journalist, host of Spice FM. I'm sure you watch Spice FM every morning, taking on big topics. Dennis?
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here, and it's really good to have this kind of conversation, especially at a time like this, where in the country you look at politics, the economy, trade, all these things are in a way interconnected. There's a correlation with all these different fields, and therefore having this kind of conversation with you guys as the intellectuals and thought leaders will be interesting to get some insights, and also from our audience, getting to hear their questions and what they're curious to know. I always say I'm a villager. I'm a student of life. I love research. I love my country, and I've been a journalist for the last 20 years, and I've seen different cycles in this country, and therefore I have a bit of institutional memory when it comes to conversations around the economy. We were actually having one earlier this morning. We're just making comparisons, what we're experiencing today compared to the last 10 years maybe. So it will be interesting to get to hear your thoughts around these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And indeed, it's about you. It's really about you. We want to hear from you. Of course, we'll have a lively discussion, but we really want to hear your perspectives on where we are coming from. My name is Ken Gishinga. I'm the chief economist at Mentoria Economics. Our work is to provide advisory support to our teams, our clients, and this is very much at the heart of thought leadership. We are very passionate about thought leadership and really getting the country to a level where we are discussing issues from an intellectual perspective. Last but not least, we have a rapporteur who's around, Tracy. She'll be the rapporteur for the event, and she'll be keeping track of the conversations. And Tracy, did you want to say something? Thank you, Tracy. So feel at home. There'll be plenty of refreshments, and now I'll hand it over to Dennis to begin our conversation. Over to you, Dennis.
Well, thank you very, very much, Ken. I think just right off the bat, before we even delve into our conversations, is like you rightly say, today is a public holiday. We never, in all our plans, envisioned that we'd have such a day where the country then is mourning, and the president declared a 7-day mourning for former Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga, who died in India. And it's interesting that we are having this conversation about these two countries that have had a very long history and a very good friendship, to the extent that India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, when we lost now our former Prime Minister, did a message and spoke about Raila Odinga as actually his friend, and gave a message of condolences to the family and also to the country. But I want, first of all, to hear from you before we go into other details, and I'll start with you, Ken. I don't know whether you've met Raila Odinga in person or interacted with him, or maybe what kind of impact has he had on your maybe personal life or the space around which you've worked?
Yes, for me, I interacted with Raila once in the gym. He is an avid gym person. He was an avid gym person, and I remember seeing him at the Crown Plaza in Upper Hill every now and then. I was just admiring at 70 years. At that time, he was 70 years, how athletic he was, and I think that was really remarkable. Obviously, he has a larger-than-life imprint on this country's politics. So when the news of his death came on Wednesday, it was quite, I would say, very, very surreal, because I lost my father in India under this exact same circumstances. Literally, on a Wednesday morning, my dad at Apollo in New Delhi, passed on. I literally just arrived in New Delhi, and in a few hours, he passed on. So it brought back those memories of, losing a loved one in a foreign land, and what happens then, because now you're almost living in a bubble, and now you have to think, how do we even, get back to Kenya and everything. So it brought back those memories, and may his soul rest in eternal peace. But as an economist, we can't talk about, the new Katiba, which has brought in so much economic confidence, without talking about Raila Odinga. We can't talk about multi-party politics without Raila Odinga. And if you look at what investors look about Kenya, they say the democratic space is one of the most important things they love about Kenya.
Any topic under the sun you want to discuss is very solid, at home with issues. And then he's also got an elephant's memory. So when you interact with him today, you describe yourself. Even if you meet after 10 years, you will still remember where you met, how you met, the kind of conversation you had. And then he had a countrywide network. He knew somebody in Mandera, somebody in Moyale, somebody in Kilifi, somebody in Siaya, everywhere. And then most important, and what majority of politicians envy, is that he grew so much political capital that he became very powerful. And one can venture and say that at some stage, Mr. Raila Odinga was more powerful than some of the institutions we have in Kenya. Like, for instance, when the Supreme Court declared its position on a presidential election, and Mr. Raila Odinga says, I disagree, then up to 50% of the nation would follow what Mr. Raila Odinga has said. And you remember when we were having our new constitution, majority of Kenyans did not even bother to read, because they said, if Raila has read the constitution and is up with this, then I'm aligned. But because of his serious political capital, he became a very powerful force, because you remember, for a nation to have stability, you need political stability, economic stability, and then military and security stability. Now, because of his power, it would affect economic stability and political stability. So I'm looking at it from a risk perspective. And that is why he's the only Kenyan who has had handshakes with all presidents apart from Jomo Kenyatta. Because if you don't shake his hand and he's unhappy with you, then it can make the management of Kenya a bit of a nightmare. And finally, with ODM now is the oldest political party in Kenya. He's the one who has steered the political party. Actually, not I meant to say KANU, but it's been one of the biggest political parties in Kenya, and because of his political capital. So he's been the glue holding ODM together. And then when you come to international relations, it's amazing that somebody who has not been head of state or head of government, because when he was a prime minister, he was none of those, has got such powerful relationships all over the world that the Indian prime minister said, this is my friend, and I'm going to take charge, I'm going to take responsibility. So when I saw that statement, I said to myself, wow. And while Kenya has got a very robust foreign policy under President Ruto, but still at an individual level, Raila was just an amazing man. Understand when Raila Odinga goes to Nigeria, they roll out the red carpet for him because of Olusegun Obasanjo. He goes to South Africa, the same. So now you begin to wonder, what kind of DNA did Raila Odinga have that makes him mix with the most powerful people in the world, the middle class, and even people at the lower level with a lot of ease? So we mourn with the family, and especially, the children and wife. I saw their pictures yesterday, and I mean, you could see the body language. They're really grieved, and we just wish all of them the best. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dismas. I think, like George, my first interaction as a journalist with Raila Odinga was 15 years ago in Mombasa. And what I remember is we had invited him for a morning show. And he came on time. But there's one thing I can only say about him that not so many people have. The only other person that had that thing was when I met former President Daniel Moi when I was in high school, and he came to our school. And this is to say that there's a towering presence when you just came around him. He didn't need to say anything. But
a magnetic feeling.
You can feel his presence. He was larger than life. And we did a very interesting interview because he was not only very, pragmatic, but he was also funny at the same time. He'll crack jokes in between serious conversations. And you hang on to every word he says. He had this ability as an orator to articulate things, and when he starts taking you down memory lane into the history, he can talk for hours about the history of this country, mention all the names of the freedom fighters. He almost knew their families. He had a very good grasp for names, dates, and detail with that very photographic memory that even I don't have. But he had the ability to move you and take you back to history, bring you back to the present, and point you into the future. But I want us to open now this conversation with the statement from India's Prime Minister. And I want to read what he tweeted, because there's some things we can pick from this post that then will inform us of what was going on behind the scenes. And he said, I'm deeply saddened, this is Narendra Modi, by the passing of my dear friend and former Prime Minister of Kenya, Mr. Raila Odinga. He was a towering statesman and a cherished friend of India. I had the privilege of knowing him closely since my days as Chief Minister of Gujarat, and our association continued over the years. He had a special affection for India, our culture, values, and ancient wisdom. This was reflected in his efforts to strengthen India-Kenya ties. He particularly admired Ayurveda and traditional medicine systems of India, having witnessed their positive impact on his daughter's health. I extend my deepest condolences to his family, friends, and to the people of Kenya in this hour of grief. And perhaps I'll start with you, Ken. You read this statement, there was a relationship here that was built before even Modi became Prime Minister. But out of curiosity, there are certain things you read in here. Raila had an affection for India, its values, its ancient wisdom, the culture, and it reflected in his efforts to strengthen India-Kenya ties. And he was very, very particular because of this place where he was going for traditional medicine systems of India, because he witnessed the impact that it had on his daughter's life. To me, it almost feels like it's beyond medicine, because every time we think of India, or you think somebody's going to India, the first thing is, who is sick? Or how sick are you? That's the first thought that comes to mind. I happen to have, I have relatives in India, of Indian descent, by the way. So India is very close to my heart. And that's the first impression every time I'll tell my friends, I'm going to India. And they'll be like, are you okay? Or I will post something on Instagram, on Twitter. Are you? I'm like, no, I've come for vacation. And nobody thinks of it that way. Ken, my question is, there is more to this relationship beyond medicine, beyond taking somebody who is sick to India, because Modi here talks about values, talks about ancient wisdom, talks about culture. What is it that you think makes India, in your opinion, very special? This relationship is very, very special beyond medicine.
Well, that's a really incredible question, Dennis. And when you talk about a country that has almost 5,000 years of culture, you'll not be surprised that that is a civilization that has depth, that has capacity in almost every facet of human knowledge, whether it's medicine, whether it's food. Much of the food we enjoy here is of Indian origin, whether it's culture, whether it's perspectives on governance. So for me, a civilization like India spans 5,000 years. And yes, we only focus maybe on healthcare and a few parts, but it's an area that I find it's almost the philosophy that you can find everything there. And I remember when I was in India, what surprised me the most when I was at Apollo Hospital, when now we were just doing all the final processing, there was a young man there, and he was sitting next to me in the reception at the hospital. This was the Apollo Hospital. And you could see he was an intern, and he was just having a cup of tea and talking to his boss. And he kept looking at me, knowing that I'm a foreigner. At least he knew I'm African, maybe not Kenyan, but he knew I'm African. But I remember him asking his boss, how is life outside of India? Like, in his mind, India has so much abundance that sometimes people don't know in India what outside there. And for me, that speaks to the richness of a culture, as opposed to many African countries where people can't wait to live. You find India, they find there is a comfort level that everybody feels everything you need. And for me, that question, I only found it in the United States when I was at an event in the US, when I remember somebody asked me, why do people even live outside the United States, because in his mind, everything you can find. And I think it's an abundance of mindset, which I hope we can have in Kenya. I hope we can get to a place where a young person sitting here even gets shocked that you'd want to leave Kenya, because in his mind you have everything. You know, in our national anthem, we have that line that says, "Plenty be found within our borders." I don't think we've reached that level as a country. In fact, our economic solution right now is to send people outside of Kenya. So for me, I think what you can learn from great countries like India, the US, India, it's anything that you need, all your dreams can be achieved, and you can find plenty within your borders. So that, you know, what Jay-Z would say, an empire state of mind. That is, I think, a mindset that has propelled Indians, not just in India, but they've gone to America, they're running Google, they're running almost all the big tech companies in America are being run by India. But I think it's that mindset that there's such an abundance. And I think even those people, even the Microsoft boss, they all draw from what was given to them in India. So I think for me, that is something that wows me. And if we can give our young people that plenty can be found within your borders, I think that can truly transform us.
Wow. Thank you, Ken. George, looking at that statement, I'm still on that statement. There's something that Modi then says, that he was a friend of India. It was beyond a personality. He loved India. And you look at the life of, it's very difficult to even think of Raila's late, our late Prime Minister. He had friends all over the world. He had friends in Germany, very, very close to Germany, had friends in America, South Africa, what this man was saying. I mean, his networks cut across, but he still chose India. And he tried during his time to strengthen the ties. In friendship, there's something they always say, at times there's a trust deficit. But in this case, Modi say, he loved India. He wanted to strengthen the ties, and he worked towards that. And he admired a lot of the things that were coming from India. This trust level, why do you think it is so between Kenya and India?
Yeah, I think for me, I can go back to the trade relationships. The trade relationship between the two nations, Kenya and India, is very strong, as the data points to that. But it's a bit tilted in favor of India. So in the year 2025, India exported around $3.1 billion worth of goods to Kenya, yeah, while Kenya exported goods worth about $319 million to India. That's according to the data from the Department of Commerce of India. Yeah, so for me, it's yes, we've been doing lots of trade between the two nations, but how can we reduce the balance, yeah, the imbalance between the two nations? So I think some of the things that we could do is one, how can we increase the value of our goods that we produce in Kenya through value addition and branding. Yeah. So how can we also encourage more Indian farms to come to Kenya to do their manufacturing here and take advantage of the ESC market and the COMESA market, which has over 600 million people. And of course also we are a member of the African Continental Free Trade Area with about 1.5 billion consumers. So that way Kenya acts as the gateway to the African market. And also how do the two nations standardize, or rather harmonize the standards? So we don't want a case of Indian goods coming to Kenya are rejected, or Kenyan goods getting to India getting rejected because of the standards non-compliance or incompatibility. So yeah, so for me, it's how can we keep on building the two nations, making sure we both benefit mutually, and grow together through joint investments and industrial linkages. So it's not about reducing the exports from India to Kenya, but how do we increase Kenya's value-added production? Yeah.
Well, thank you, George. Yeah. I mean, this was speaking from what George has said. I mean, trust then is built, and more importantly, through trade, because the economy is when you talk about trade ties, there are always these tensions between countries. We've never had tensions, as far as I can remember, between Kenya and India, for example. There's been that very mutual, beneficial relationship. And picking from what Modi was saying, Raila was a friend of India, wanting to strengthen the ties between Kenya and India. This relationship that has existed for all these years, what is it that you pick? Because you've looked at other countries that have had relations in Kenya, and there's always this conversation that there are countries that are interested in having a relationship with you because they want to exploit you. They either want to exploit your resources, they either want to take over your space and do their business, and then when they're done, they dump you. We've had those kind of conversations with other nations. But when you begin talking about Kenya and India, it's been this relationship where there are no bumps, and there's this trust between the two nations. What makes this stand? From this statement, just to extrapolate this statement from Modi, and just looking at generally from what George was saying, trade, another interest, what makes this relationship really stand?
Actually, outside trade, there is education. Before, majority of Kenyans knew about, like these two gentlemen, about US and UK. Majority of Kenyans used to go and study in India. And I've got a family member who went to India to study, and she came out top of the range. So even as we speak right now, there are a number of several public servants of rank went to India for their studies, even including Professor Sam Wangeri, a top medical doctor. So there's that relationship from education. But even before you go to education, it's Indians who put up our railway line. So they came here a long time ago, they put up the railway infrastructure, and they're to be found everywhere in Kenya. I don't think there's a region or a town in Kenya where there are no Indians. And what makes the relationship between Kenya and India very strong is they've got a cultural competence. They know how to stay with their neighbors. They mix or slide into the culture, and they're very happy people. In fact, my first employer in Kisii was Indian, Dogo Khan. So he gave me the first job, and he spoke my mother tongue very well. So you even begin to wonder, this gentleman an Indian, but he speaks my mother tongue, Ekeusi, very fluent with proverbs and idioms, that he can speak my language in a manner that I cannot understand. I have to go and ask an old person, what does Dogo Khan mean? And then he's the one who started Shabana Club, which lives to date a very powerful team. Then outside that, he was actually nominated, at some stage he was a nominated councillor to the Kisii Municipal Council. But if you go to most of the county assemblies, or even the National Assembly and Senate, you will find Indians there, because they appreciate different cultures, and they develop very solid relationships. That is why you can never, ever hear a complaint about an Indian in Kenya. So I think we are joined at the hip. Outside that, they're very good entrepreneurs. So when they're doing their businesses across Kenya, they actually benefit the nation. And in my view, that is something maybe Kenyans need to learn from. Again, from what Ken indicated, there are many things Kenyans can learn from India. Like, for instance, when you talk about their ICT infrastructure, deliberately they have invested in developing top ICT talent. As Ken indicated, at some stage, people are saying, if you want to become a CEO of a top ICT company in the US, you must be Indian. If you if you do a Google search right now, the top 10 ICT companies, they're run by Indians. But when they're running those organizations, they do not load on anybody. They do it, you may think they're natives. If you go to the UK, in the House of Commons, 26 members of parliament in the House of Commons are actually Indians. Then UK has had an Indian prime minister. So can you imagine? And I understand this goes roots from, I think, Kenya, from the region. When you go to Canada, the McCartney's cabinet, there are 3 Indian cabinet ministers. So you see the way when they go to a community, they make everybody happy, they stick, and in my view, that is something we may need to pick from India, because for Kenyans, we've had very nasty experiences with our neighbors. When you meet with an Indian, he will not start boasting, telling you, you know, I'm from the largest democracy in the world, or, boasting about their nuclear power. And like some Kenyans, when we go across maybe Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, tunaenda na kifua mbele, we are banging tables. You know, for instance, not long ago I was in Tanzania and I saw a Kenyan man. So this man wanted to order for a drink. So he says, wait. Then the Tanzanians look and say, what's wrong with this gentleman? So what India beats us is when they go to any community, they understand the local sensitivities, the kind of language you have to speak and how you speak, how you relate with people. Can you imagine that you go to a shop in, say, Muranga, and you want to buy githeri? It's called githeri in your mother's tongue. Yeah, but the person who is selling to you is an Indian speaking your mother tongue. And then you can have stories with him. That is something, in my view, Kenyans can pick from India. And then number 2, we all recall Barack Obama. We understand he's a Kenyan American who was president in the US. Maybe we need to borrow this thing from Indians that I think they decided to conquer the world. So if you have 3 cabinet ministers in Canada, they've had a prime minister in the UK, then one of their own is the president of the World Bank. Why can't we borrow from India and send all Kenyans to go and study outside? In as much as you said we need to have planes within our borders, but if you don't have sufficient, let us go and study and get the best practices, like these 2 gentlemen who went to the US. They came back, but I wish they had stayed there, married, and then their sons and daughters end up becoming presidents. Thank you.
Well, that's very interesting, Dismas. I mean, like I said, I've been to India several times. Just to throw these in very quickly as we move on, and it's something that you've mentioned. I wrote down a couple of things. Actually, I have them here. 15th of April last year. I love doing notes. Every place I go, I notice things. I wrote down around 26 things that I learned at that time in India. I'll not mention all of them. But among the things that I observed that we lack in Kenya, as the world moves very fast, there are things that culturally do not change, and that is family. And I don't know how many of you here, even in the audience, have you ever seen an Indian hanging out in a restaurant alone? Have you ever? They go out, they are always with family. And it's something I noted, that you'll find a father will pick the grandmother, grandfather, all their kids, they're going to a hotel, they're having a meal. And a lot of the spaces that I found in India, very family friendly. They think of children, they are thinking of the elderly, they're thinking of everybody. So you don't feel out of place. Very few places and spaces in Nairobi, for example, where you can think of, you want to take kids, you're thinking of a mall. But a lot of the other places are built and centered around adults having a drink and stuff like that. But they think of family. And when it comes now to business, because you touched on business, the business is not modeled around an individual. It's generational. And there are shops actually in the CBD. If you walk around the CBD, you'll find a shop that is selling the old Casio watches. And that you find a young Indian man there. That business was owned by their grandfather or even great-grandfather. But they still have the same shop selling the same things. So they modeled their businesses around generations. They're not thinking now. They're thinking 50 years, 100 years. What am I going to leave for my sons? And then they rally all the families, all the family members into the business. So you'll find this 65, 70-year-old man who runs this food store. You'll find they have their daughters who are 10, 15, 20, also helping out, learning the business. And I sort of admired that there's something then we can pick from that where where we are as a country, we are so individualistic that if you think of business, you want to get capital alone, you want to run the shop alone, you die, the shop dies with you. But in India, what I found is they rally themselves together. The families support, they support each other. And I want to move to an economic question. And this is, yes.
Allow me to buttress that point, because when you go through the media,
Yes.
I've never heard of a family wrangle in an Indian setup, especially maybe when the parents pass on and then the business collapses. Unlike what tends to happen in Kenya every single day. There's even an outlet in Karen, the Karen Provision Store. Understand it's been around for almost 100 years, and nothing has changed. Very solid infrastructure, friendly staff, and something else, the owners, they know their clients by name. They know by name, and they can even predict what you are going to buy, which I found to be very amazing and shocking.
Yeah, and very, very genuine. Like, I would wake up in the morning, go to a shop, have chai. And they'll be doing the same chai, same recipe. And each family, for some strange reason, there's so many. So each family has a secret ingredient. They have all these recipes. So you hear they've been making this tea for the last 100 years the same way. But cars will be parked outside. People are getting in to just buy that chai. People will drive distances to buy that. And I asked one shop owner who was making biryani, and I loved their biryani, especially in Lucknow. And I asked him, because all the celebrity chefs, you can imagine, have actually passed through him. They have come to his place. And it's not a 5-star place. It's not a complicated place. He sells from a very modest space. And so I asked him, why don't you open this business, expand it to other states? And he told me, Dennis, what God gave me was this, and I'm satisfied with this. They're not greedy. They are okay with what they have. With my Kenyan mentality, I'm thinking, you are selling a plate of biryani for 100 shillings. Spread this to 50 shops. That's a lot of profit, yeah? We think of the money first. Then they're thinking, whatever God gave them at that particular point, that's what they're running, and they're okay, and they're blessed with it. And
I also understand that when you look at our coat of arms, Arambe has got its origin from India. Yeah, oh, yes. Arambe has got its origin from India. Ken is nodding, I'm sure he's got more information.
And so, Ken, I want us to look at, because this was talked about, people going to study in India. George was talking about how we've been trading. And I want to pick on that. And my question is, we often talk about these trade deficits like what George was talking about. The bigger issue may be what we are then trading as a country, okay? From an economist perspective, how can Kenya shift from exporting or thinking of primary goods to exporting knowledge, exporting technology, exporting high-value products? How can we get there?
Now, what George said was very true, that we have a very big deficit. We import from India way more than we export to India. And I think it speaks to our low levels of production in Kenya. And I think it's tied to what you and Dismas have said. It's about our art of thinking about production itself, production and innovation. And it's actually tied to what you said about culture and history and family. In fact, one of my clients out in Karen was telling me, as Indians come together, the way you said, in a family, and they're eating together, sometimes that is when the best business ideas come together. In fact, he calls it innovation hospitality. And basically he says, as you are with family and friends, as you are enjoying, good ideas come up. And these good ideas can become companies. In fact, the concept of the pagoda in India is exactly about that. It's about people coming together, sharing, talking, eating together, and solutions are founded. In fact, I'm told a company like PayPal was actually founded like that. So for me, the fact that even our spaces for innovation are still very individualistic. We talk about the hubs, innovation hubs, but we're not talking about, are we looking at our history? Are we looking at our culture? Are we drawing from the depths? I think the biggest challenge we have in Kenya and most African countries is we believe all good things must come from the West. And I think that was part of the colonial damage we had as a country. We believe all solutions must come from the West. We don't have our own solutions. But if you go back to the comment Modi said about Raila, he said he admired the herbal medicine. In fact, that is what helps Raila's daughter. So India has this idea that there's amazing things in the West, but there's amazing things in India. So if you can be deeply local, but also very global, what they call glocal, that is the idea. And I don't think we have that in Kenya. In Kenya, it's almost as if you have to extract your historical culture, which is why we don't spend time with we don't know anybody beyond our first cousin. Indians can tell you up to their third cousins, because we don't believe there's solutions there. But Indians, they don't ask. We find in Kenya we have, and most African countries. I remember I lived in Cairo, Egypt once, and Egyptian ladies normally have curly hair. But when they go for an interview, they'd want to straighten the hair. So I remember I asked one lady, your curly hair is very beautiful. Why would you want to straighten it? They tell you, oh, that's how you appear more Western when your hair is straight. That's how you'll get a job. That's how you'll fit in like you're an American. But why would you want to fit in? And that's why I think Indians, they reject that mindset. They say, with our love for our food, our culture, we are going to use the strength of our culture to conquer the world. So even if you go and talk to the Microsoft CEO, I'm sure if you went to his house, it's deeply Indian. He draw everything from India. So I think that's one thing we lack in Kenya. How do we draw from our history? And I mentor a lot of young people, and all they say, are you drawing from your history, from your family resources, from your family history? We don't know much beyond maybe our first grandfather. Very, very few people know about their great grandfather and what we did. But Indians will tell you up to 5th, 6th. So I think it's an idea that before you become global, first be deeply local, understand. And that's when you start producing goods, because you realize, oh, my grandfather was a tailor and he was actually very successful. How can I maybe improve on what he did as a tailor now to start exporting to India? And that's why the trade deficit is as it is. We are not drawing from the wells of our tradition to be able to come up with goods that are so unique, and now we can export them to the rest of the world. So that's the big challenge, being able to think deeply about ourselves, come up with solutions that are unique, then now we can export them to the rest of the world.
Wow, Ken, that's powerful, because what I hear is what even we as journalists in the media space, we've struggled with is to essentially copy the West, our style of dressing, our presentation style, everything. We're trying to imitate the West, that then as a country we've lacked an identity. And I think there was even a time when we were trying to come up with our own national attire, and there was a conflict. We have over 45 tribes in Kenya. So you're thinking, how do you merge all this together? Is that lack of identity then that makes us not have the uniqueness that then we can export? Because in Kenya, we've had the best lawyers actually have been Indians. Doctors, you will trust an Indian doctor than you will a doctor from any other place. And so it's drawing from that depth, like what Modi was saying, ancient wisdom that they've managed to capitalize on. And this brings me to this question, George, from a financial standpoint, because we're talking about these trade deficits, what we are exporting, what we are importing between the two nations. From your standpoint, what practical and short-term measures, even as we think long-term, could Kenya adopt to unlock new export opportunities and reduce this imbalance?
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. But before that, just to a point on how Indians are very good at passing on knowledge and skills to the next generation, and keeping the trade in the family for 2 or 3 generations, or maybe even at times even 5 times. I went to India in 2019 to attend a wedding of my friend. So the groom's father is very big in agrochemicals in India, and I think he told me that the father was on the 4th generation, and the business has been very successful, and it's grown to become a very big exporter of fertilizer and all those chemicals. So to your point, to answer your question, to bridge this imbalance, like I said, in my first point, I mentioned increasing the value of our exports. Yeah. So by value addition and local processing and branding, we increase the value of the exports. That way, we reduce the trade imbalance. Yeah, because the value of our exports have gone up. So then we reduce the imbalance. The other way to reduce the imbalance is to make the environment here conducive for manufacturing, to bring in the Indian manufacturers into the country to manufacture here, and then they can now re-export back to India and to the global north. Yeah. So by re-exporting to India, we reduce our trade imbalance between the two nations. Yeah, and also we've had the EPZs in Kenya, the SEZs, which are operating, but we've seen the EPZ not doing very well. It didn't realize its full potential, mainly due to some restrictions on selling locally, because for the EPZ you had to sell at least 80% must be exported. We've seen challenges with cost of power, and its reliability. Yeah, we've seen the challenges in the logistics side and infrastructure, which also raise your costs. And manufacturers are very sensitive to the margins. So if we can streamline these things like cost of power, things like policies in terms of logistics inefficiencies, then we can actually improve on the margins for the manufacturers, and they can come here to build the factories here and re-export to India and the US and the UK, and at the same time taking advantage of the COMESA markets and the ESC markets. So so I think that's just some of the things that we could do. Other things we could do are coming up with performance-based tax incentives for manufacturers who create jobs here or meet some export quotas or production threshold. Then we can give them these incentives, which are tied to performance. So for me, it's about a win-win situation. How do we bring in the Indians to come and manufacture here, but at the same time also create jobs for Kenya, also bridge this trade imbalance, and also and also and for the Indians, they get to enjoy this ESC market of around 300 million people, the COMESA market of around 600 million people, and of course the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has over about 1.5 billion people. Yeah.
So before I lose my train of thought, because I'm hanging on the point where you're talking about EPZs, and maybe just to get your view on this, between EPZs, that's export processing zones, and special economic zones, which model then between these two do you believe offers a better return on investment? Well, for both Indian investors, because you've said bringing in Indian manufacturers, they can do the business here, manufacture locally. So what do you think then offers the best return on investment between, for both, well, Indian investors and also local manufacturers?
Yeah. So if I can maybe touch on the fiscal incentives for the EPZ. So for the EPZ, you get a 10-year corporate tax holiday. And for both sides, you get VAT exemptions.
That's for EPZ?
Yeah.
Yes.
But for the VAT, it's on both sides, and also on import duty for the machinery, equipment, and also inputs that you need for your manufacturing. You get zero duty, and of course there is the free repatriation of profits back to your country. So for the SEZ, the beauty of the SEZ is, yes, you get 10% tax on the first 10 years, then another 15% tax for another 10 years. Then from there you go back to the standard 30%. Then of course you have your similar to the EPZ, you get your VAT exemptions, withholding tax exemptions, and input duty and VAT on your machinery and inputs. So the model for the EPZ didn't work with the investors very well because one was they over-relied on low value sectors. Yeah, it was mainly on the garments and textiles, as opposed to other sectors where India has a global comparative advantage, such as pharmaceuticals and your industrial goods, engineering goods, yeah. So I think the focus should be now to shifting as we make the SEZ work. It will be now to move to the high value sectors. So the pharmaceuticals and the engineering goods.
Okay.
Yeah. And
you want to tell me on that?
Yeah. I kind of disagree with that. And I think this has been the dominant policy, thinking that if you give a 10-year tax break to investors, they'll come and thrive in Kenya. And actually the evidence doesn't fully bear that fact. Kenya is already a very attractive investment destination. We have a very attractive demographic. Our median age is 19 years. We have good infrastructure, both physical and digital, M-Pesa. We have a very diversified economy. You see, unlike in the West Africa where they depend on oil or gold, Kenya is very well diversified, whether it's tourism, whether it's agriculture, pretty much anything you want is in Kenya. And Kenya is the one country a lot of foreigners want to come. In fact, the man with the Guinness Book of World Record for the most traveled countries, when he was asked, out of the 190 countries you've been, which is the best country you've been, a British man, and he said Kenya. So for me, this whole idea that we need to start giving tax breaks to companies to come to Kenya, I'm not fully on board with that idea. I feel we just need to review our tax system. If you look at India, corporation tax is 25%. Here is 30%. We just need to make sure our judicial system is in order. If you invest, you can get your money out. Kenya is already extremely attractive, and the whole idea of giving companies 10-year tax breaks, just tell them you'll be able to make a profit. Come to Kenya, we have a justice system, we have good infrastructure, you can get more, you can make very good profit. You don't need now to defer, because that's what's leading the country now to start running deficits. Where now you start foregoing 10 years of taxes from a big company, that's massive. So for me, I'm not big on giving tax breaks to foreigners, but make the business, actually, I keep saying, make the whole country into one big EPZ, where taxes are low, interest rates are low, everybody can make a profit. Make Kenya into one big EPZ, but don't have pockets, because those pockets, they'll come, they may not make a profit, but you've already forgone a lot of taxation.
So the ROI then will balance both local investors and foreign investors. That's what you're saying.
Maybe my question to Ken is, Ethiopia, Egypt are both COMESA members, just like Kenya. So they both offer tax breaks. And here I am as an Indian manufacturer. Do I go to that country which gives me like a 10-year tax holiday, or do I go to Kenya?
Yeah. What makes Ethiopia, Egypt attractive is the cost of power. The cost of power in Kenya is very expensive. 1 kilowatt hour is about 19 US cents. You go to South Africa, to Egypt, to Ethiopia, it's about 2-3 US cents. So you're making 6 times more cost. So the way we've destroyed Kenya is we've made the business environment very bad. We've made our cost of energy high, our high taxation. It makes people who love Kenya not want to come to Kenya, because the human capital we have in Kenya, Ethiopia cannot compete with the human capital we have in Kenya. So we just need to go back to what Kibaki showed us, that have a low interest rate regime. Before this session, somebody was asking me, how come money is not circulating in Kenya like it used to? And that's a very powerful question. It's because we follow this model where the government is borrowing heavily and it's crowding out the private sector. So the government is issuing out bonds. If you look at the Talanta bond for the Talanta Stadium, it was 14%. And this takes money from banks would rather take money to the Talanta Stadium bond than to lend to you and I. But if you remember the Kibaki days, people would literally, you'd finish an event like this, there'd be a tent outside. You'd have a tent and there'd be, people would be signing you up. They'd say, oh, I want to see your pay slip. You've already qualified for a loan. And that's why you don't see money circulating. That's why our purchasing power is very weak. And that's why companies don't want to come to Kenya, because the purchasing power is weak. So even if you give them tax breaks, they'll be like, okay, we'll come up with these products, but will the citizens afford? Because their pay slips have been assaulted. You're paying SHA, you're paying affordable housing, your pay slip has make you weakened. So even if you give somebody a tax break, will they generate a profit when the local population has the purchasing power has been weakened? So for me, I think we need to do away with tax breaks and just focus on strengthening our purchasing power as a country, create jobs, and all those multinationals will be flocking to Kenya.
And yet, Dismas, you can't divorce politics from this conversation, because every cycle, what we've seen in this country, unlike India, and I'm going to ask you a two-barreled question, because you are a political risk expert here, because all these things George and Ken are talking about, if your politics is bad, it's going to affect all this conversation. India has remained politically stable despite its diversity through the years, and we're talking about lessons that we can learn and what kind of exchanges we can have. How can Kenya, because what we currently have, speaking from what Ken said, I was in Uganda and I was having breakfast with this gentleman who's one of the managers of a very big security firm, and they were leaving Kenya. The headquarters, they were moving it to Uganda. And so when I was asking, why are you moving to Uganda and I've known you to be in Kenya all this, and he said, the environment has changed. They are heavily being burdened by taxes, and there is lack of goodwill, because every time you want to make 2 steps forward, 1 step forward, you're taking 3 back, because the environment is not so conducive, because you want to start something, you're going to be asked for a bribe. You can't make any movement unless you lobby. So how can Kenya replicate a balance between politics, democracy, development, cohesion? That's one. The second thing is political risk often deters foreign investors, because it's tied to my first question. So what governance reforms do you think, or measures, can Kenya also now adopt to make the business environment more stable for Indian investors, for any investor coming into the country, where whoever is president, whoever is governor, whoever is MP, whoever is MCA, doesn't necessarily matter. You will still come and do business 10 years later and it will still be conducive.
What we must embrace is meritocracy. One of the things that India has done very well is to embrace meritocracy. And there are 2 levels. First of all, there is democratic meritocracy. The majority of their elected leaders are some of the sharpest tools in the shed. When you compare the people we elect to our county assemblies, National Assembly, and Senate, then you compare them to India, actually there's no comparison. So they've got this democratic meritocracy, that the people who are elected are very solid. And then they also have non-democratic meritocracy. People work for their public service. That also they are the sharpest tools in the shed. Like for instance, where you have non-democratic meritocracy in Kenya is KDF. Right now there is a recruitment for both commissioned and non-commissioned officers. Today for you to join KDF as a cadet, the requirements, I think it's probably B+. So they make sure that the civil service has got the sharpest tools. Now, when those people are responsible for your policy formulation and execution, you are always going to hit the high notes. And then, when they're voting people to office, they go for character capacity, and competence. Majority of our leaders have got capacity and competence, but their character is horrible. You remember when we were fighting for the new constitution, we said this constitution is horrible. But when Kibaki took office, with the same constitution, without altering anything, we had very superior outcomes, which talks to character. And then, for some reason in Kenya, again in the political leadership, according to scholars, they say we have two kinds of political leaders. There is the political cunning leader who knows how to win an election, and then there's the political conscious leader who knows how to govern a nation. For a country to be successful, you need a politician with those two attributes. If you recall the campaign for US, when Barack Obama was running for the campaign, he used to deliver very powerful speeches. Now, from a political cunning perspective, and the cunning is really ukora, but it's from a political science perspective. He used to deliver very powerful speeches. But the moment he was pronounced a winner, a few hours later, the kind of speech he gave, people were shocked. Unfortunately, in Kenya, majority of the political leaders we have here are politically cunning. So as soon as somebody has been sworn into office, they're preparing for the next election. They don't care what happens during those 5 years. But in the UK, in the US, they actually want to deliver. Now, the reason why we must be very careful with the kind of politicians we elect is because when you talk about the three pillars of a nation, political stability, economic stability, and the military and security stability, it's the politicians you elect into office who take all these decisions. Like, for instance, our National Treasury has got some of the best economists. They prepare documents, but it's the politicians who take decisions. So you may have the best solution, but if this decision doesn't serve a politician's interest to win another election, they will not take it into active consideration. That is why when we're electing people, we must be very careful. I mean, when you look at India as the biggest democracy, about 968 million voters, so understand the equivalent of a National Assembly has got 543 members. But they get the best tools. Now the altercation, this intellectual altercation between these two Ivy League graduates can be sorted out by making sure that Kenya is a low-cost production center. Because part of the reasons why you will get all these multinationals going to any other country is looking at the cost of production. And as Ken has indicated, our cost of power is extremely high. I understand an economy like Zimbabwe, the cost of production, sorry, the cost of power is actually much lower than Kenya. So if you address these cost of production, then Kenya can have, we can take now advantage of globalization of markets and production and tell those Indian multinationals to come and set up in Kenya, because now the cost of production is going to be very low. And that is something you can do with your eyes closed. But if now we want to start asking why the cost of energy in Kenya is very high, then now we may be opening a Pandora's box. Go to the independent power producers, cartels, and those contracts they put up. And finally, one of our biggest challenges is that our leaders keep on doing these benchmarking trips. But I've never had them go to India. I don't know whether maybe India doesn't have 5-star hotels or it doesn't have beaches, but I don't know why they don't go to India. Because if they had gone to a city like Bangalore, they would have known that Bangalore now serves the entire world. Understand there's something they call global cities, or rather global corporations. About 55% have their hubs in India, 55%. And what do those hubs do? You'll find a multinational, say, a big multinational from the US, but all their stuff is being done in India, because India has developed human capital for the US market. So understand they're even trained to speak in their accent. So I don't know why Kenya has not borrowed that leave. And even how to manage elections. When Dennis was having the conversation the other day, the IBC is made up of 3 commissioners, and then you have 968 million voters, electing about 543 members of the equivalent National Assembly. But the election is flawless. You've never had anybody complaining about an election in India, which was unfair, unpredictable, and anything else. And then finally, if you follow Modi, actually, indeed, any Indian prime minister, wherever they go to, any country, the Indian community is just amazing. The other day I saw the prime minister was in the US. There were so many Indians who came out. He goes to the UK, there are so many people who come out. And maybe that is something we need to embrace. And in as much as I know there are people, probably Ken is one of them, who don't want Kenya's top talent to go and work outside there. But I keep on asking the question, if you've trained as a nurse, and you come from a place called Mosocho, and every single day you're yawning under a mango tree, and there's a job in New Zealand or Australia, why can't you go and work there? Why should you just stay at Kenya and start taking Mira and start engaging in immoral activities simply because you're waiting for plenty within your borders and the opportunities glaring everywhere? And finally, this thing about languages, where Kenya's got a big challenge. Majority of Kenyans speak their mother tongue, English, and Swahili. But other countries which have made progress, they have adopted the international languages. Like, for instance, if you go to Angola, they are craving for Kenyan English teachers. But our Kenyan English teachers can't go to Angola because they don't speak Portuguese. Part of the reason why we have a crisis with Kenyans in the Middle East is because they don't speak Arabic and they don't understand the local culture. But India encourages these people to be multilingual, polyglots. I mean, how do you find an Indian here speaking English, Kiswahili, Doluo? Like, for instance, I don't know how many come from Kisumu. There is that MP from Kisumu who is very fluent in Doluo. There's also an MP from Meru who is very fluent in Kimeru. So why don't we take pride in having learning these languages like Indians have done? Then we can take advantage of the globalization of markets and production. Now, for the political risk, fortunately for Kenya, as Ken had indicated earlier on, we've got a fairly reliable judiciary. So you know that if you go to Kenya and you have issues, the court system is going to work. And even some of our friends across the region, they're very surprised by how our judiciary works. That the president can make an appointment today, and then the courts tell him, no, you can't do this. That is the kind of stuff people really like about Kenya. As late of yesterday, a gentleman identifying himself as Michael Nyango went to the court wanting to stop Mr. Raila Odinga's funeral. I mean, you can see the kind of judiciary we have. But I think Justice Mita looked at the papers, he said there was no merit, he told the guy, take a walk. And then another thing maybe associated with the political risks is the predictability of our fiscal and monetary policies. I think in good parts, although Ken is more qualified in that subject, is doing very well. And then of course now there is the other risk around social issues where India has beaten us. Because any India, wherever they are going to set up a business, the first thing they do is to understand the local sensitivities and the local dynamics. And Kenyans, we have done badly. Like for instance, if you had to go and do business in Tanzania, how can you go there and you are speaking as if you are in the middle of the Nairobi CBD, speaking in a very horrible manner, your language is not sanitized, you are not polite. It's horrible. There's a day we had an incident, a friend of mine, I don't know how many of you can remember Simas. So I had two friends from Tanzania. So they went to Simas with a Kenyan guy. So when they went into the restaurant, the two Tanzanians. So the first one took a seat, looked at the waiter, he said, habari dadangu, nzuri sana, naomba Fanta baridi. So the waiter goes and has a conversation with the manager. Then they say this, yula naomba Fanta baridi. So there was a conversation for a few minutes, but eventually they brought in a Fanta baridi. Then now when the second guy came in, akasema, dada habari yako mzuri, mi naomba taska ya kwangu baridi. Then he says, what's wrong with you? Your colleague have already given them a free Fanta, and you want free beer. What's wrong with you? Little did they know that kuomba does not mean that it's free. So, we need to understand those dynamics for us to make sense and make progress. Thank you.
Well, those are very good examples. And I want to throw this for the three of you. When I was in India, because we're still talking about business, trade, before we move on to other subjects, and this conversation around stability, it doesn't matter who's in leadership. You are confident that the system works. You're confident that if you're starting a business, that there's a conducive environment. I want you guys to speak on this question of monopoly. And out of experience, there was, I think the first time when I landed in India, and I was going to be there for some time, the first thing you get to an airport is you want to get a SIM card. You want to have access to Wi-Fi, you want to get straight to the internet. And I walked to this shop, and I paid at the time the equivalent of 50 Kenya shillings to get a SIM card. I can't remember how much that was in rupees. And then the gentleman tells me, okay, so here's your card. You have 15 GB data, which will be updated every week. And I told the gentleman, I'm only here for a short time, so I don't think I will need more than 15. He said, no, it's for free. So I asked him, wait a minute, did you just say 15 GB data on this phone, and at the end of the week, you are going to replenish it for free? And he said, yes, every week, as long as you're staying, for the next 1 month, it's going to be free. That's 15 times 3 weeks, GB free. Then talk time is free. I said, this is heaven. You know how data is so expensive in this country. And so I asked my host, and he said, yeah, you can talk forever on that, and there'll be no disconnection. And I said, why is it this cheap? And he said, the reason is the Indian government has ensured that they don't just allow one company to do business. You can't have a monopoly, because therefore then you're going to control the market. Second thing I observed, when you go to their malls, when you go to their shops, they have some of the biggest brands you can think of. And I also asked, so how comes the cost for clothes, if I compare buying a shoe in an Indian shop, what the cost will be in Kenya, 15,000, there will be 2,000. And I said, no, this has to be fake. You know, the Kenyan mindset, when you're out of Kenya, how can this thing, if I go on Google, it's 15,000 Kenyan shillings, and you're telling me it's 2,000 here, then this must be fake. I said, no, this is actually original. So even the 15,000 one we are buying here, it's actually already fake. Then they're selling the original 2,000. And so I asked, why is it this cheap? And he told me, the reason is, if you want to manufacture an iPhone, they're telling you manufacture it from here. You want to start Adidas, whatever, you have to manufacture from here. But I look at our country, we're importing so much that we're not then insisting, you want to sell an iPhone here in Kenya, please, we have a big space here in Ukambani, we have spaces. Come set up here, manufacture everything from here. They are thinking of the local people. What does this concept do to change a business environment? And why are we not adopting that? I may not have the economic language to ask it, but you get my point. Why don't we think of that? We still have a lot of monopolies around. We're still not reducing cost of, like earlier I would say, purchasing power, where if I have 2,000, I can actually wear a serious brand and not fake, an original.
And I can very much relate with that, Dennis. In fact, to your story, when I was in India, I was surprised at how Airtel provides so many services there. It's not just your telephony, you go to your hotel room, basically it's their DSTV. All the TV channels are Airtel. And I asked myself, if Airtel can do this in India, why is it not doing this in Kenya? Meaning that it's being prohibited. I don't want to mention by who. But it goes back to the issue of monopoly. And I think the problem we have in Kenya is government. Our government wants to do business and it wants to serve the people. And you can't serve two masters at the same time. If you look at our parastatals, it's part government ownership to serve the public good, and there's a private sector element. But you can't serve the two. And I've always said, government should not be in the business of doing business. Government should exit the Safaricom, should exit the KQs, and let them be business entities that can compete. Because how do you compete with, can you imagine in a football team where the referee is a shareholder of the team you're playing against? So for me, this is what drives the monopoly. And that's why a brand like Airtel that thrives in India provides so many channels, cartoons, movies, can't do that in Kenya, because in Kenya its hands are tied. So for me, it's government needs to get back to the business of ensuring law and order, ensuring justice, what in economics are called the public goods. When government engages in private goods and has an interest, it's very difficult. And we almost feel like now you're confined, and that's even the cost of data. You can't get, just even 1 GB of data in Kenya, it's very expensive. So for me, it's just the public sector mindset has to be, public sector is for the public good. Let the businessmen and entrepreneurs do the business. And that will reduce our taxation. Because to your second point, taxes are what are making Kenyan competitive. The cost, because I know Dismas likes wine, the cost of wine in Kenya is 5 times the cost in South Africa. So if you're a wine manufacturer and you want to come to Kenya, you'll be like, will I get a market if I'm charging 5 times? And much of that because of taxes. When you go to South Africa, they'll tell you buying a car from the showroom, it's not a big deal. In Kenya, when you get a car from the showroom, the whole estate will not sleep because it's, But in South Africa, it's an everyday thing because our taxation system.
Same thing with India. And actually the incentives, a lot of, they try to ensure that there is no second-hand purchase of vehicles because 1, environment, 2 is also reducing levels of accidents. Because if you're buying a car that is 7 years old already, that's like the minimum standard. What are you then saying? So going to a shop to get a vehicle no utoe makaratas, it's not something very big in India, for example. But in Kenya, I don't know how many of us here, by a show of hands, have walked into a showroom and drove out with a car, 0 mileage. Kunamtu, even for us here.
That is a miracle. But something else very unique to the India, outside what Ken has spoken about are the economies of scale. Because when you've got a population of 1.5 billion, if you compare to Kenya about 50 million, then you can see that you can afford to have to reduce your cost substantially. But it's not as if that Kenya doesn't have that opportunity, because we are members of EAC, COMESA, but we still have those non-tariff barriers. But again, about corporates in Kenya, I think most of the private sector leaders in Kenya are not very, some of them are my clients, I need to be very careful, but they're not very innovative. They just sit back and wait for people to make purchases. They don't go the extra mile. For instance, when there was mobile, during the offset of mobile telephone in Kenya, it was very clear that Airtel, the then equivalent of, it was Kcell, had a superior network to Safaricom. But for some reason, Kenyans had the emotional connection to Safaricom, so they went with Safaricom, knowing very well that there is a superior network elsewhere, but they did not run with it. However, now with the time, under Michael Joseph, Safaricom came up with that very superior network. Now with Safaricom going to Ethiopia, one hopes that at some stage, you can actually have one SIM card that you can use in Kenya, Ethiopia, everywhere, without having to adopt to the local network. That's why I think we can make progress. And also the issue of taxes, again, scholars and practitioners tend to have different opinions. Like for instance, in the Nordic countries, the taxes are very high, but you still have people investing in those countries. So I don't know whether that issue has been settled by these Ivy League guys, because they say that in the Nordic countries, taxes are very high, but the government delivers. So people are generally with that. But in Kenya, taxes are very high, and most of the time, government doesn't deliver. Like for instance, you pay taxes, but you have to pay people within your estate to give you security. You have to buy your water. You have to do your own garbage collection. And it goes back to meritocracy, that the people you elect into office, do they actually serve your interest? And something else that India does not suffer from is agency conflict. Because most of the time when you elect people in Kenya to office, they consider power as a factor of production. So once they go to office, they use their office as a factor of production. So some of the bills passed in the National Assembly are very confusing. You begin to wonder, do these bills actually serve Mura and Wanjiko, or they're serving the members of the National Assembly. Like, for instance, you recall the legislation around money laundering. The MPs did not want to pass the law as it is. Then you begin to wonder, if this law serves our national and public interest, then why do you want to? And you recall the president said that there was money going around for them to scatter the process. Even during the finance bill, which led to the Gen Z demonstrations, the members of the National Assembly had passed this, although they had removed those obscene components. But when the president said, I'm returning this thing back to you, all these MPs went to the top of Mount Kenya and they proclaimed the wisdom of President Ruto. So you're wondering, when they were in the House and passing the bill, they did not have that wisdom to see that there are some defects within this bill which may make Kenyans unhappy. So there's that agency conflict, which is something that we need to address. And indeed, the Kenyan Constitution is addressing that under the Leadership and Integrity Act. The Auditor General every single day complains about resources being stolen. President Kenyatta once said we lose 2 billion shillings every day. But I don't know how many people are behind the bars on account of losing 2 billion shillings every day. Thank you.
You know, somebody did, actually I did the calculation, if my memory serves me correct, because I've been dealing with those reports every day from the Auditor General. And if you put 2 billion shillings in 100 notes between Nairobi on the road, utafika Mombasa. Did you guys know? Because sometimes it's difficult to quantify numbers in our heads. So it's become normal when you read, 100 billion has been lost, 20 billion has been lost, and you can't even begin to imagine if you are to spend 2 billion, you as one person, and let's assume you're going to spend 50,000 every day. How many years will you spend that money? Let's assume every day, your lunch, your dinner, your breakfast, and whatever it is you're doing, you're spending 50,000 every day. How many years will it take you to finish 2 billion? It's a lot of money. But I want to circle back to a different conversation. And there was a time, George, where when you talk about exports, there are challenges in terms of standards. You can have market access, but then your standards will prevent you from accessing those markets. And it's not that the laws are not there, it's not that the markets are not open. There was a time Kenya was exporting avocados, and it did well. Then I think it was Europe, I stand to be corrected, that banned. So we can't actually export avocados. And the most recent report, I don't know whether this has changed, where there was an announcement for the closure of avocado exports by sea for this year, 2025-2026. And this was actually effective October 20th, just the other day. Wait, October 20th, hatujafika bado?
Monday.
It's Monday. Actually effective Monday. Good. So effective Monday, there's no exporting of avocados by sea. And this is due to concerns about immature fruits being harvested and exported. And I want to ask this, George, how important is standard alignment and certification? You have market access, yes, but how important is this? Are these two things, standards alignment and certification, in then expanding Kenya's export footprint into India, because you were talking about India. And because we're not really doing that, what reforms would you propose or think of to make Kenyan products more competitive in the Indian market?
Yeah, so for Kenya, we mainly export tea, soda ash, leather, and some legumes, some pulses, yeah, to India. So what comes to mind for me is how do we improve our health and safety standards, yeah, in terms of the food grade of the food commodities. So how do we align in terms of standards between Kenya and India? How do we raise our standards so that our goods don't get rejected on the other side? Yeah, maybe the other thing we can look at is how do we improve on the breeds, yeah, on the breeding. So how do we maybe get breeds from, if it's for tea, can we get breeds from other tea producing areas and improving on our strains of tea, just to make sure that we don't fail in terms of standards, So, and in terms of the other main exports, like leather, for instance, it's how do we also not train our farmers not to brand? You know how we used to brand the animals just with the branding road. So such kind of leather is normally rejected. So it's awareness, just creating awareness on to our farmers. I think that's what I have in mind.
Yeah, I can also add that I think with this era of globalization of markets and productions, if a Kenyan entrepreneur wants to do business in India, just go to India first and study the market and find out what you can get from Kenya to India, so that the product, whatever it is custom made for the Indian market. Because we have this funny excuse that we don't meet international standards, but our tea goes to the European Union and UK, where you have very serious standards. Our products are all over the world. So I think for somebody to be a success, you must go to India and study their markets, what they may need from Kenya, understand their standards, and then comply with it. The challenge is that majority of our international traders, they just want to cut corners. They want to sell substandard goods, like what you're talking about. Why would a rational businessman harvest and ripe fruits and you want to sell them to the international markets? That is unacceptable. You've got a homegrown which sells vegetables and fruits to the European Union, to the UK, and they do an amazing job. So there is evidence that in fact it can be done. It's only that maybe some Kenyans are very greedy for profits and they want to cut corners. And in my view, maybe we need a law in Kenya which would probably fall under terrorism to punish this kind of guys who want to sell substandard goods abroad, because now they spoil Kenya's reputation. You know, when you talk about national branding, like for instance, if you mention Germany, what comes to your mind is top-of-the-range engineering. Top-of-the-range engineering. If you mention Japan, what comes to your mind is efficiency. If you're going to buy, say, any home appliance, and then you've got a product from, say, UK and China, there's a very high probability that you'll pick the one from the UK, even without picking the brand. So maybe we need to come up with a piece of legislation to punish these guys who go around assaulting Kenya's reputation by attempting to sell substandard goods in the international space.
And maybe just to add, before Ken goes, also we can also, in terms of value addition, can we also use Indian technology, in the processing of the tea, or if it's the leather, and also bringing in the capacity from India in terms of human capital. At least that will help in transfer of knowledge and also building the confidence on the other side.
Actually, before Ken comes in, before you come in, we are going to be stopping you. If again you're a prudent businessman, you want to go to the Indian market, why can't you identify a partner in India, and then you do maybe a joint venture, or you become a contractor or a subcontractor? Then now it will save you the pains of doing all these studies. Again, the way we indicated earlier on is the greed in Kenya, that you'd rather own a kiosk across the road valued at 200,000 and 100% shareholding, instead of having 1% shareholding in Microsoft.
You know, there was a time I was watching this breakfast show, actually a show, Dennis, and your colleague asked an onion farmer, why does she buy onions from Tanzania and not from Kenya? And I thought her response was quite fascinating. She said, Kenyan onions, you find the farmer is not using the correct seeds, the correct fertilizer. Basically, all the inputs are wrong. So when the onions are ready, they have a lot of water. In fact, the word she uses is zitalipuka. If you take those onions, 2 days zitalipuka. So she rather go to Tanzania, where they're using the correct practices, and it's correct because the inputs are cheaper, so you can use quality seeds, cheaper seeds, and get the correct onions and come and sell them. So that, again, addresses the issue George was raising around our import and export, where maybe the cost of doing business becomes so high that you want to cut corners. So if you're an onion farmer, you don't want to get the correct seed from Kenya Seed, you don't want to use the correct fertilizer because they're very expensive. It eventually leads you to a low quality product and you lose market share. There's a question Dismas asked about how come Kenyans don't benchmark in India. In fact, he asked, doesn't Bangalore have 5-star hotels? Actually, if you talk to Donna here, and I'm sure she'll ask a question as we prepare for the Q&A session. Donna is from Bangalore. She spent 15 years, and she'll tell you everything you need in India is 5 minutes away because of the efficiency of delivery. There are 5-star hotels. The Taj is a 5-star hotel.
They actually have, the first time I had culture shock. Talk about culture shock, and if you've never been to India, I encourage you to go to Dubai. Go some of these countries, you'll be so fascinated about some of the things they do. I remember just in, sorry to cut you short, we were having dinner, and then my host, do you feel like having ice cream? This is like around 9 p.m. I said, well, I don't mind ice cream, but there's no ice cream in the fridge. It's like, okay, I'll just blink it. So they have an app called Blink It. And the app tells you, this ice cream will get to your house within 3 minutes. And I said, no way. I put my stopwatch, and we're like, let's bet. Within 3 minutes, the doorbell rang. The ice cream came very, very cold. You order a pizza, it comes very hot. If you try that here in Nairobi, you order pizza, because I've done that many times. Guys, hiyo kitu itakuja ikiwa baridi, you have to microwave it. Because we lie. And the app is telling you this thing is getting to your house within 10 minutes. But 25 minutes, you even start making follow-up calls. What I realized in India, there's a day it delayed. And you know what the company policy says? If it delays beyond the time they've stipulated, you get it for free and you'll get another one. You're not paying for what you've ordered and you'll get another one. And it happened. They are very true to their words. And, speaking of Bangalore, I've been to Bangalore City a number of times. I've gone to the Silicon Valley. The fascination, the thing that is interesting, you go to one part of India, it's different from the other, yet you're within the same country. So you go to a place like Lucknow, very, very different. Food is a bit different. The biryani is different from whatever you'll eat in Bangalore. But just tying into what you're saying, you want something, there's that efficiency and convenience. You want to order something, you get no cutting corners. But in our country, is it lack of laws? Because this was talking about, I think maybe we need, but they always said, the lawyer said the law is very clear. Is it the lack of laws we have, or is it an integrity and character and moral issue with us?
It is
because if you say the onion, nakuzia hii kitunguu ni mzuri, yes. 3 days later, that thing bursts in your kitchen. You're asking, is this juice fresh? They tell you, yes, this juice is fresh. You test it. The thing is chemicals. We can't tell the truth. Even when somebody is really willing to buy, what's wrong with that?
I think Kenya has some contradictions where we have exceptional minds. Some of the best minds in agriculture are Kenyan. In fact, when India had food security issues in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, many Kenyan scientists went to contribute to that. And now India is the largest producer of milk. It's the largest producer. And everywhere you go to Botswana, they'll tell you the beef industry in Botswana was learned from Kenyans. You come to Kenya, East Coast fever, the cure for East Coast fever was discovered here in Mogoka. So we have the best minds. But our incentives are not for the common good. We've privatized. We look for private interests instead of the common good. I always reflect on the Ndegwa report of 1971 that allowed civil servants to do business. And I think that was a major, I can understand that time, maybe salaries in government were quite low and they were trying to encourage people to make good income. But I think what that did, it opened us to conflict of interest. Tenderpreneur culture where, during the day, I'm the Minister of Agriculture coming up with laws, but in the evening, I'm the same businessman trying to import. And that's why Kenya imports everything. We import wheat from Russia.
Actually, we import toothpicks.
Toothpicks. We import sugar from Brazil, wheat from Russia, onions from Tanzania. And it's because there are people who have these import licenses that can make them billionaires. So why would you want to have domestic production? And that's why the other day you saw in Narok, wheat farmers were up in arms and they were asking, why are we importing wheat when we've not cleared the local stocks? It means there is somebody, the fastest way to become a billionaire in Kenya is just to get an import license for a commodity. Basically, it's all bank financed. So because of that conflict of interest, where during the day you want to serve the public, but in the evening you have a private business, for me that conflict of interest, and in countries like China, they do not tolerate that. It's either you're a public servant or you're a business person. You cannot be both. You'll be short if you're both. So I think in Kenya we need to go back to say, are you serving the public good? You're a public servant. Are you doing business? But those are two separate lanes. I think the moment we do that, we're going to open up our economy in such tremendous way because there'll be no longer any conflict of interest.
Let me add to what Ken has said. When you're looking at Kenya and India, maybe if you're trying to look for the common denominator, the two countries are democracies, although Kenya is presidential, but with India being a parliamentary democracy. So there's a lot of democracy. Understand in India you can speak your mind just the way you do it in Kenya. They've got a very strong judiciary, the same way like in Kenya. You know, the civil liberties and everything else. So because of that, one can easily say that you are more compatible, that it's almost a similar operating environment, unlike maybe China, where I understand that, well, there could be freedoms, but the freedoms may not be freedoms so essentially, the system is very controlled and you have to drive on a certain lane. But in India and Kenya, you can drive in as many lanes as you want and you achieve progress. So if you want to go and do business in India, you'll not be shocked. That is why when Indians come to Kenya, they're not shocked. And then all of us being members of the Commonwealth, I think it's the same thing. You recall when we attained independence, in fact, majority of the judges in Kenya were Indians because it's the same legal environment. Even right now, we have Indian judges. Some of the best lawyers, the way you indicated, they're Indians. In fact, everything from India, if you bring anything from India, you bring to Kenya, it's compatible. And that is something that one can take advantage of. If you have to compare maybe India to other countries like China or Russia, then doing business with India is a very exciting proposition.
I think my last question to the three of you, even as we open this up for the audience, if you have any question, I'll come over to you with a microphone and you can ask any of our panelists a question. As you prepare your questions, maybe my last question will be centered around our current environment and the conversation in this country, and then we make comparisons with India. For example, the example we've been talking about, Bangalore, is the Silicon Valley of India. I mean, these guys are doing some brilliant stuff that India is the leading hub for information technology. And it hosts a lot of, it hosts very many IT companies domiciled in Lucknow. But of more importance is they're actually exporting their IT expertise, talking about import-exports, and they're leading IT exporter. So then Bangalore is the nation's top IT exporter, and what they have done then, they have grown this massive infrastructure around that space. And you come back to Kenya, we have a lot of young people even in the audience here, a lot of Gen Zs. The current ongoing conversation is the job market is shrinking. Companies are folding. There are no job opportunities for thousands and thousands of graduates with very, very good papers, brilliant minds, but they can't get jobs. And we've been thinking linear. And my question is, when we hear what the government then is saying, that we want to make sure that young people have border borders, for example. And this is not to throw shade. This is the real conversation, correct? that we want to get the mamambogas, we want to build sheds for these borders, we want to give them water tanks for car washes, we want to do this and that. For the housing projects, the affordable housing, we want to employ young people to come. And I, as a journalist, I take a step back and I'm thinking, wait a minute. We have a lot of young people with IT skills. The digital space is expanding. I've gone to other African countries where to even get 4G, when you go on YouTube and you play a YouTube video and there's no buffering here in Kenya, there are countries you go, you have to look for where you can get even a small movement because they're not in the same space where we are as a country. And there's good credit for the expansion in terms of data access and all that. But when you look at then India's economic rise with this in mind, it's accompanied by a very heavy investment on skills, on research. That's why it's producing good doctors, lawyers, people in the IT space, vocational education. What kind of economic policy, guys, should then Kenya pursue to balance this growing number of young people who are getting into the tech space? They're brilliant in the technology they're coming up with. The other day, we interviewed a young man who's come up with blockchain technology that will ensure we run our elections very cheaply. The current cost per voter in the last election was 2,000 shillings. Per voter, 2,000. They're reducing it to 36 shillings. This 2,000 is the most expensive election in the world. You compare UK, you compare the US. I stand to be corrected this month. So what is it that then Kenya can learn from how India has then invested so heavily in those areas, such that you're thinking of the future? We're talking about AI, but there's another conversation here about Boda Boda. And the world has moved and people are creating things. What is it that we need then to do, and I'll start with you, Ken?
That's a really good question. And human capital is the strength of this country. As I said, we don't have gold, we don't have oil. So human skills are what we need to sharpen, and we have a good education system. So I think it's focusing on exporting services. If you look at one thing India does very well, especially in the Kenyan banking scene, most of the bank IT consultants come from India. I used to be in the banking sector, and I would see them, the consultants living in very high quality apartments. So I think we focus so much on exporting tea and coffee, but the real gold of Kenya is a human being. We have really good skills, but we are still tied to the coffee and tea and tourism business. We are not seeing how do we get these young people towards giving them the best skills to thrive. And the young people are doing incredible things. I remember meeting a young man many years ago who actually paid his dowry using Bitcoin, and the father-in-law was so shocked. Like, okay,
did he even know how to get the Bitcoin?
The father-in-law, he accepted it, and the father-in-law was very smart. He converted it very quickly, and it actually really appreciated. But we have, how many cultures do you have that kind of example? So for me, I think this whole idea of the bottom-up needs to be rethought. We need to get into skills-based. We need to have small community colleges, these vocational small community colleges, that where you can reskill. If maybe you studied something and it's not working out, you go into the college, within 3 months, you have a new skill. And that's how America thrives. We talk about the Ivy League universities, but it's the small community colleges that help people reskill, that help people survive in the labor market. So if AI comes and takes away your job as a software developer, you go to the community college, get a new skill, within 3 months, you're back on the market. So that dynamism, I think it's tied to our education system, getting our small community colleges that are very accessible, and even subsidies by the government for young people to get skills, and also for young people to market their skills, not just within Kenya, but to take advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is providing tariff-free exportation of skills.
George?
Yeah. So for me, to upskill our students and our youth, I think a couple of measures that we could take. One, scholarship programs. So can we organize programs with the major colleges in India, like the IITs and and the major colleges in India for our students to go there for the technical.
Like exchange programs?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And as you mentioned, exchange programs, it should be for both students as well as teachers also. Yeah. So can also our lecturers or professors go also to India, and also like from India also they can also come to Kenya and at least learn from each other. And also the other thing, the government can work on the innovation hubs and incubators. So can we have like we had the famous one, we just forgot. So yeah, I have. Yeah. I have this world and this one I'm forgetting. There's a garage, maybe garage, and there's also such incubators and accelerators can actually stimulate growth in that tech space in Kenya. And like Kem said, we actually rely a lot in the banking space on co-banking systems from India, as well as the consultants, as Ken said, and also many ERP systems in Kenya. We rely heavily on India. Yeah, so I think in terms of human capital, the government should actually invest more to upskill our youth.
Now, because Kenyans and Indians have got similar attitudes, I would suggest a few things and probably repeat what Georgia said. In my view, universities in Kenya should have partnerships with the big players in India, especially if you're talking about ICT. I don't understand why a university in Kenya, maybe Strathmore, the University of Nairobi, or Masinde Muliro, shouldn't take their teachers to India and find out what does that market want. And then you produce talent which is able to hit the ground running. The challenge we have today is that majority of the graduates, and it's something which happened during the entry of mobile telephone in Kenya. Even some of the engineers who are well trained were unable to hit the ground running. They had to be trained for maybe another 6 months before they can actually become productive. I recall then I was working for a PR company, and we wanted to engage with one of the public universities because we really wanted to find out what is the challenge they have. They're not producing what the industry wants. So we only had one meeting. And then the second meeting, the professors did not show up because they were embarrassed by their curricula and by the understanding of the market. So I see no reason why we shouldn't have these universities and TVETs going to India to find out what exactly do you want. Because India's got many of those multinationals, then we can have partnerships, maybe establish joint ventures with them, or become their contractors, or even subcontractors, or even these outsourcing business. So in my view, the opportunities are galore. And then number two, I think now in future when we are going to, as you approach the elections, during some of the debates, and Ken, it is up to you to organize conversations, so that anybody who is running for public office, we seek to understand whether they understand globalization and how we can take advantage of it. Because part of the reason why these benchmarking trips do not make sense, they go to countries that are not compatible with Kenya. So they go learn so many things which cannot be executed in Kenya. But if you go to India, all these things we say we have in common, democracy, a judiciary, functional systems, there's a lot we can learn. So really the ball is on Kenyans to ensure that we have the solid leadership and take the relationship to the next level.
Well, now we're ready to take questions from our audience, and just to panel beat that point I was just reading through. The Indians who are actually running, Indians or Indian origin IT experts. In actually US alone, you've got the CEO and chairman of IBM, Indian. You've got Cognizant CEO, an Indian. You've got technology executive board member for Padmaster, Indian. Vinod, Indian. You've got Alphabet, Google, Indian. You've got CEO Microsoft, Adobe. All this. There is no Omondi or Wanjiko in some of those leading spaces. Yet, we have a lot of young people with brilliant minds. But What also the government has done, that's my last point, I was just reading through why then is Bangalore so big and how is it that then they're exporting their expertise to the rest of the world? And it's because there's government support. And how is it doing it? The city's rise as a tech hub was actually supported by the government, and it was designated as a science and defense technology hub in the 70s. And it has not changed despite the successive change in the governance structure. And it included developing infrastructure and supporting elite engineering schools. And when you're talking about our laws and our politics, this means that if a new president comes in, you're not changing everything, overhauling the systems, whether it's education. These people have purposed, and it's very layered that this is what we're thinking of doing, and this is our future, and it will not change no matter who comes into power.
Yeah, let me buttress your points. Now, Kenya has got 47 counties, and before President Kenyatta left office, he gave KDF the responsibility to start building and repairing ships. I think now they're called ships. I don't know whether I'm talking about animals or those vessels in the water. But now, since we are doing that, KDF has got a facility in Mombasa and Kisumu. So one would have expected that the Kisumu governor and the Mombasa governor would actually now take that to the next level. Because you've got Lake Victoria, so you can make part of your core interest or core business in Kisumu around shipbuilding and ship repair and Mombasa. Then you specialize in that. Then another governor would say, maybe in Moranga or Kisii, that for me, I'm going to make my county the ICT hub in the region. Now, then you get a piece of land, then you go invite all these guys from India to come and set up a base, especially wherever there is an airport, if there's an airport close by. But if we don't have a meritocratic leadership, then the interest will be in the procurement budget. They will not be visionary, because why would you want to be a governor for 2 terms, and when you are done, the only thing to write home is your presence at EACC? There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. I really get confused.
Well, I think right now we'll take the question. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and they'll come to where you are. Do you have questions? Oh, there's actually a mic there. Good. You can state your name and where you're coming from.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel for the thought-provoking conversations, brilliant conversations. So my name is Anthony Ano. I'm a friend of Mentoria. So mine is a comment on that paradox for Kenya, that we can be the best and the worst at the same time. An aspect like M-Pesa is widely accepted by even a grandmother in the village who has not gone to school. But when it comes to efficiency tools like the e-procurement, Artisasa, e-elections, stuff like those that can create efficiencies and save on costs, like the 2,000 shillings of managing an election, we seem not to get it for some reason. So I'm wondering, is it the greediness of our politicians, the people who manage our country, or what is it exactly that can make us not accept something like e-procurement that can really make our lives better? Thank you.
You want to take that?
Yes. You know, most bureaucrats in Kenya don't like an efficient and effective system, because an efficient and effective system does not serve their interest. Like, for instance, why should any Kenyan, upon attaining the age of 18 and having an ID card, why should you go again and register as a voter? Shouldn't you just go and vote directly with your ID? But because we have a vested interest in every sector, there are cartels waiting for an opportunity to make a resource. And that's why, even right now, a number of permanent secretaries, or rather accounting officers, are fighting the e-procurement. Because people know that if you adopt e-procurement, then you are going to cut a lot of middlemen, and then you're going to make the system efficient and effective. And when you make the system efficient and effective, then these people who make a kill will be very disturbed. And then, are you not surprised that today, the most popular program course in the university is actually procurement? Everybody wants to study procurement. Nobody wants to study law anymore, or engineering, or medicine. It's a procurement. Because as soon as you get a job, within 2 years, you'll be dancing to the bank. So I think we have this high capacity, insatiable capacity to steal. Because, believe you me, everybody in the public service knows that you can actually vote with your ID. But why are they making it impossible? If you can trust M-Pesa with a lot of resources, why can't we trust an app for voting purposes? But what is the budget of IBC? It's about 53 billion. Now, if you've got an app which is going to make voting efficient and effective, do you know how many people are going to miss out on the 53 billion? And have you ever wondered that during an election, they never have a challenge with logistics? Even in the remotest place, there's a lady who comes from Samburu. Even in the remotest place in Samburu, there'll be voting items, but not for other public services. Thank you.
And interestingly, just to tie into to what you're saying in terms of efficiency, it's breeding a culture where what is in it for me? It's selfish. And talking about election, because we hosted an official from the Indian High Commission in our show, and we're just making comparisons. Why is our cost of elections so expensive? We can't afford it, yet we have to do it, and there's a trust deficit. For example, we import our ballot boxes. Those plastics we're importing. We're importing our ballot papers. The ink, we are also importing it. And we were surprised that, and we have all these commissioners. In India, they only have 3. And they don't import their ink. They actually manufacture their own. Actually, they export that ink from India. And the technology that they're using for the elections, they actually created their own technology. And they trust their electoral system. But for us, Kenya, if you say any technology, your server iko happy. Up until today, there's a question about opening the server. And Raila has rested, and that question has not to be answered.
And also then,
and there's a time I told kuna vifaranga via computer, if you remember that statement. Yeah. So it's a trust issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and also let me buttress that. The ballot paper in Kenya has got more security features than the Kenyan currency. Can you imagine? That the ballot paper has got more security features than the Kenyan currency. And although we know that technically right now, with the minor care ruling, it's technically impossible to steal an election, but how much money is set aside for lawyers at IBC? Because I understand that a huge chunk of the IBC budget goes to legal fees. So in my view, people in position of authority, they create a system which is deliberately inefficient and ineffective so that they can keep milking. I mean, if you take our electoral system to India, they will not declare results in 5 years.
That's a good question. Anyone else with a question?
Yes, question over here. My name is David Chasiri. I'm an alumni of Mentoria, and I'm now in the pension space. So I love this discussion. There's been a lot of interesting things that have come up. My question is, I'm throwing a spanner in the works. What can we learn from Donald Trump? You know, right? Donald Trump, the president of the US. Currently he's having a proper head-to-head with Modi. And I think yesterday he mentioned that he's successfully persuaded him not to import oil from Russia on the basis that he feels that there's a lot of trade imbalances between the US and India. So he's been applying a lot of pressure on them on that, and also with tariffs and so on. Now, bringing it back to what you mentioned, George, our trade imbalance, where our trade volume is close to 3.5 billion. But when you talk about our robust international relations, we focus on the US and China. But where's India in this equation, given that they gain so much from our relations? I believe in comparison, China, our trade volume is close to 5.5 billion, 6 billion, thereabouts. So it's not so far off, but there's a gap. However, that translates to China investing in close to 75% of our foreign debt, of our sovereign debt. Compared to India, when was Ruto there? Was it last year or the year before? But Modi promised $250 million. Yeah, those are peanuts. $1 million of that went towards flood relief. A big chunk of that went towards river tax, but not a lot of that has come into building our capacity, especially when you're talking about in factors of production, our capital base. In the building that I live in, there's close to like 30% of the people in there are from India. They're not Kenyan Indians, but straight from India in the past like maybe 2 years. And what do? They're in the pharmaceutical space, they're in the agricultural space, they're in the manufacturing space and machinery space. But they haven't set up anything here in Kenya. They're working as proxies or agents for companies in India, helping to build that trade gap. So what can we do to sort of build some leverage, and what can we learn from Donald Trump, once again, to sort of ensure that we're getting something equitable in return? So we're bringing in things like pharmaceuticals. That's fundamental to, our social security. But we're not seeing any manufacturing plants coming up by way of India. What can we do to encourage that kind of investment?
Thank you, David. I think I'll begin from that point of healthcare and pharmaceuticals. So Kenya, currently we import around 70% of our medicines from India. And like we've discussed before on the issue of medical tourism, so around, for India, I think last year, around 1.4 million foreign patients were treated in India, yeah, of which around 20,000 were Kenyans and about 60,000 were Africans. So for me, I see a big opportunity for how do we make Kenya the medical tourism hub for Africa. Not just Kenya, how do we make it here in Kenya? So a Kenyan or maybe a Ugandan or a Zimbabwean who needs to go to India for, let's say, open heart surgery or maybe for cancer treatment, instead of going to India, which may be expensive in terms of travel costs, can they come here and actually we retain that foreign exchange outflows here in the country rather than exporting it to India. And by so doing, we'll improve our healthcare standards and also save the families on the travel costs. So the other thing is, in terms of FDI flows, can we encourage Indian pharmaceutical companies to come and set shop here and be the hub for manufacturing for Africa? For me, in this relation, I don't see it as just Kenya. I look at it done in Kenya, but for Africa. So how do we make Kenya the gateway for India, while India remains as a link for the global south. So like we discussed before, how do we increase our exports to India, or rather how do we reduce that imbalance? It's about making the manufacturing environment conducive in terms of the cost of power we discussed, and reliability. We discussed about value addition of our exports. Don't export in raw form, but add some value, and that way you improve on the industrial, in the backward linkages with our supply chains and our farmers and our suppliers, and at the same time also how do you also improve on our logistics? So we need that smooth flow of goods from Kenya to India. Yeah. So India is like Disma said, it's home to around 1.45 billion people. So we need access to that market, and for us to take advantage of that, we discuss about the standards harmonization and how do we get access to the market through improved tariffs and yeah. So I don't know if you can maybe have anything to add from there.
Yeah, no, those are really good points, and I know David is also coming in from the pension industry and compared China and India, and indeed China gives us lots of loans for development, for infrastructure. But David, I'm sure you know that the pension industry is massive in Kenya. And 92% of our pension assets go into bonds and real estate. The question is, how do we start tapping into those pension assets to start transforming? I know your team is in conversations to begin that, but we have homegrown patient capital that can help us transform. So we need not go begging China, begging the West. But your question, what can we learn from Trump? Trump said, America first. We need to have leaders who will say Kenya first, India first. And that's what leadership is really about. Maybe the elements that, about the way he says about it is crude, but I think it's time to have leaders who are patriotic, who are living in the best interest of Kenya. And that's what Trump has done, trying to create jobs. Whether the policies that he has will be successful, that's a debate. But I think we need to go back to what Dismas was saying about how do we get the very best people into public service. And that's actually what happens in Canada. In Canada, if you're a first-class student, you go and work in the Reserve Bank of Canada. You work in government. Basically, government takes the top cherry. Then those ones who don't get now go into private sector. In Kenya, it's almost the reverse. If you go into government, it's like, oh, wow, you don't like, I remember there's some young KRA people who got into KRA and they were assigned to destinations, not Nairobi, not Mombasa, to other parts of the country. And within 2 weeks, they resigned because in the mindset is you make money in KRA from Nairobi and Mombasa. So I think it's, again, building a culture where the public service is getting the best and that filters up to the top leadership. And now you start having policies that are really, really for the common good. And I think that's what has been lacking.
I'd like to share an entirely different perspective from George. Like, for instance, when you talk about medical tourism, the probability that Kenya can compete with India as far as medical tourism is concerned is almost zero. For instance, the cost of medical care in Kenya is just obscene. The cost of the pharmaceuticals is just obscene. When you go to the hospitals in Nairobi, they no longer have patients. Everything is customer care or client care. Inherent in that definition of customer care or client care, there's a profit motive. Now, if you get 70% of your products from India, pharmaceuticals, then how can you compete from the person who's giving you those products? But in my view, what we must do is create partnerships with the big players in India, in any sector. Because with your population of about 50 million people and 1.5, you cannot be globally competitive. So in my view, the answer is in creating these strategic partnerships and also creating incentives. Like, for instance, I don't see anything stopping these guys who have resources going to India, finding the big hospitals and maybe opening subsidiaries or branches in Kenya so that then we can create some sort of partnership. Because if we start competing with them, then before we even start running, they've completed the 100 meters dash.
But let me tell you something, Dismas. If you look at statistics such as cesarean section, the global average for cesarean section is about 9%. So basically 9% of women deliveries go through cesarean. In Kenya, it's about 40%. It's extremely high. And what's the reason behind that? It's because the cost of cesarean section is much higher. So even with a patient who does not need cesarean section, the doctor will say, I think you need, because he knows the hospital will make more money and he'll be called back because most of these doctors are consultants. So they'll say, Dr. Dismas is the best. He recommends more cesarean, even if the lady does not need. So you start seeing this, what we call a moral hazard problem, where you're not giving the best. Somebody will tell you, it's common knowledge that you only need, I think, one kidney to survive normally. So somebody will come and tell you, a doctor will come and tell you, I think you need you're unwell. I think I need to do a kidney surgery. And just because they'll be able to increase fare. So there's a moral hazard problem which drives up our cost of health care. which makes us uncompetitive. You go to a normal hospital with a common flu, you'll go through so many tests, things that have nothing to do with a common cold, just because the doctor has targets. So there's still a moral, yes, India has that, because you're right, the cost of care in Kenya is 50% more than in India, and the cost of India care is 70% less than US, but there's still a moral hazard that really, and that's even in this whole SHA debate, one of the things the government has been saying is people are claiming more money. Somebody went there for one day, has claimed it for weeks. So I think there's still a moral hazard thing that we have to tackle that can bring our cost of healthcare down.
Yeah, let me also buttress that. You know, I understand from medical doctors that having a C-section, that surgery, is the basic form of surgery. And it's very basic. You don't even need a consultant. And once a friend of mine, then when St. Mary's Hospital, Nairobi, was in good shape, his wife delivered via the C-section. So he told me to go and check him out. At the back of my mind, I said, hapa sasa tunaenda mchango. So, but the bill came 11,000 bob, and it was a C-section. 11,000 bob, yani 10 plus 1. But if you go to these other hospitals, which you can't name because of libel or slander, it can easily come to 250,000. 250,000. Now, then if you're talking about medical tourism, where would a Russian or our neighbor from our neighboring country come to Kenya for a C-section of 250,000 if they can go to India and get it for maybe 10,000? So, in my view, those are corporations, and of course now the moral hazards. I don't know whether we need to revisit the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, I think just to clarify with Dismas is, what I meant is bringing that medical tourism from India to Kenya, partnering with the Indian investors. Yeah, so you have your Apollos, your Medantas, your Fortis, Manipals. So as in, how can we? Yes, it will still be the Indian investors are doing it here in Kenya, yeah, and at the same time improving our local capacity in terms of skills, in terms of the medicine, in terms of all the consumables. So for me, it's basically Indian capital coming to Kenya, but still using our human capital, and also saving the families that trouble of traveling to India, paying the flights and the hotels. Yeah. So that way we can retain our FX outflows here in the country, and yeah. So yeah.
Well, there are a couple of things to unpack. All is not lost, and because my job is also to fact check and also to inform. How many know hospitals we have, not just in Nairobi in Kenya, that are either that are of Indian origin? Anyone? That they've come here set up. So there are quite a number. Guru Nanak, for example, in Pisha, Aga Khan. Okay, so there's that investment. And if we talk about Indian involvement then, especially in the medical sector, because we were earlier, the panelists were talking about then medical tourism. I remember 2021, former late President John Pombe Magufuli flew from Tanzania to Kenya, Nairobi Hospital, for COVID. You guys remember that? We've had, I remember 2007, the former Somali president left Somalia, came to Kenya for bronchitis treatment. So we've had people who've come into the country because of that. It's just now to expand. But talking about costs, this is a personal experience. So there's a time I went to, I will not mention the name, it's a tier 1 hospital here in Nairobi. Wanted to do a blood test that then, very detailed, that would then tell me the minerals, things that I'm deficient with, so that I'm able then to know, okay, I need to eat more cabbage than this, or I need to punguza salt, or sugar, this and that. And I asked about the cost. It was 50,000. Wow. Of course, I was going to pay it for insurance, but I never went ahead to do it. So I'm in India, so one evening I'm having a chat. There was actually a doctor when we were having dinner, and we were just talking. And I said, before I go back to Kenya, because I trust your results, can I do these tests? I want to do ABCD. I said, oh yeah, sure, you can do that. But okay, I need to go to hospital tomorrow, plan my days. Like, go to hospital. You don't need to go to hospital. He said, what do you mean? A technician comes to your house, a lab technician. You know, you're walking from your home to go to hospital to the lab. You queue a whole day just to get a small whatever of your blood. There, the technician comes to the house with the full kit and everything. 7:30 in the morning, he drew my blood. And so I asked, so how much do I need to pay? I said, okay, you're going to pay, but these results, do you want them to come on email or physical? It was a whole document. It was so, they don't hide records the way hospitals hide your records. You almost want to fight to get your own personal records, and it's your own health and your sickness. But then they give you everything. When I asked the cost, guess how much it was? 5,000 Kenya shillings equivalent. Wow. In Nairobi is 50,000. There it was 5,000. Then you wonder why people are going to India for medicine. But examples, Medanta Africa is a joint venture between Kenyan investors and the company RJ Group of India. They're planning to build a 200 tertiary bed capacity in Nairobi. Narayana Health has taken equity stakes in Kenyan hospital projects. So for instance, the Indian company Narayana has partnered with Kenyan doctors and finances to set up a 500 million hospital in Nairobi. All these are plans in the works. I don't know how far some of them have gone. Apollo hospitals that you earlier said you'd had gone to, announced plans actually to set up a tertiary care hospital in Kenya so that they can then expand their footprint in East Africa. There are so many hospitals. I can go on and on, but because of time, I don't want to go into the details. So that connection, a lot of times, a lot of things don't go through the media. And unfortunately, because I come from mainstream media, a lot of these things will not be announced unless you do your own research to find out how we'll then leveraging, to answer the question, on our partnership and relationship between Kenya and India, especially when it comes to this field. So there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that a lot of people are not aware of unless you really dig to find out. Maybe we can get a few more before we wind up. Anyone else with a question?
Hi, sorry, it's echoing. Okay. Hi, great discussion. And I think now it's off. It's okay, I'll try and shout. So yeah, thanks. My name is Donna Di Costa. I'm from Nairobi, but I've lived 15 years in Bangalore. So it's really great to hear all your insights. And one of the main things that I picked up on was your discussion about human capital. So I have come with my colleagues as well as friends from India to Bangalore, from India to Nairobi over the years that I've been there, and they've been super impressed with our communication skills. So last year I was here with my boss at the time. I was working in ICT, and he was really impressed with Kenyan communication. He wanted to set up a call center here, because in India, there's a lot more training that's required for people because of their native languages. They don't pick up on the accents so fast. There's a lot more funding that needs to go into training, whereas in Kenya, he thought it would be so easy. People speak English, can have a call center with people in the US. But there was issues with visas and all those different kind of things. And I know this was mentioned about partnerships. So how do you envision starting those kind of partnerships between Kenya and India, especially in terms of human capital?
But then, do you need a visa to go to Kenyans? Well, for me, I think that is something which can be addressed at the flick of the finger. If all Kenya needs to have a stronger ties with India is doing away with the visa requirements, then I suspect that is a proposal that Honorable Musalia Mudavadi would take on board and work on it. Because Kenya's foreign policy, in as much as it focuses on peace and security, there's a big element of economic and commercial diplomacy. So if it means reviewing the visa requirements, but wait a minute, I thought that was for Africa. So in my view, there is a proposal which can be taken to the next level and have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Kenya work with the Ministry of External Affairs in India and sort that one out. And then, of course, on the very unique points that you've raised around the the human capital, the human talent. Again, that is something which the Gen Zs would pick very easily. Because right now, everybody in Kenya essentially speaks English or Kiswahili. So if it's working for those outsourcing facilities or the call centers, again, in my view, all you need is a few of these entrepreneurs or business and corporate leaders to set up the infrastructure. But again, I think the challenge is in Kenya when somebody has got money, instead of looking at these innovations, unique opportunities, all they want to do is to buy a land and build apartments, not knowing that a call center is something which is worthwhile, not knowing that there is this business process outsourcing. So maybe again, it could be lack of education or awareness. But again, I'm wondering whether a solid investor would actually lack awareness or innovation. But I think that is something which can be highlighted and taken up with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thanks.
Yeah, just to add on to what this person said, there's a company in SA called CCI. Yeah, so they do lots of. They are big in call centers. So I believe the Indian companies in that space are encouraged to come and set up the call centers here in Kenya, and they can take advantage of that human capital. And of course, any subsidiary from India being formed in Kenya will benefit from our double taxation agreement, which is in place. So the profits they make here, they won't have to pay, once taxed here, they won't have to pay twice again in India. Yeah, thank you.
And also for partnerships, I'd also recommend the Ken Invest. Ken Invest have a lot of, it's the official place for investors from abroad to come in. They have a one-stop shop in Upper Hill where they can connect you to people. There is a Chamber of Commerce which has a chapter here and a chapter in India. We also have KEPSA, that's a private sector alliance. So there are all these entities, so it just needs a bit of networking in those spaces and you'll be linked with the right person.
I actually think that that space in outsourcing is something which is untapped. Because a long time ago when we used to do PR for some players in the ICT sector, we discovered that because of the cost of, say, labor in the UK, a medical doctor would do the prescription on the normal piece of paper. They would scan it, and then I put it in a folder, send it to Kenya, and then bright Kenyans would reduce it to a Word document and email it. And you can have these bright young Kenyans who are like spending most of their time on TikTok. Instead of doing that, now they can get that job. They get the documents, of course, on a confidential basis. They read the medical doctor's handwriting, and most of them were nurses. And then they produce a Word document, because I understand you can't afford to get a nurse in the UK to read a medical doctor's document and translate it into a Word document. So maybe that is an opportunity which Kenya can partner with India.
But to answer you, I was actually, I may agree to disagree. I was shocked the other day along Mombasa Road. So this is between General Motors. You go all the way to almost near the river, or Mlolongo, sorry. So behind, on the right side, there are a lot of warehouses, there are a lot of buildings. The number of people who come out of that building over lunch, you'll be amazed. And so there's a time I took time to drive around the area to just understand what business is going on here. And I discovered there are a lot of call centers that are actually domiciled within that space because, of course, of numbers. There are around 6 major call center companies that I'm aware of. And the reason why then Nairobi is very attractive, although this has had some controversies, even content moderation for a lot of companies like Facebook, they've had offices here in Nairobi. The president the other day was talking about TikTok also coming to set up here so that content creators then can get direct access to then understanding, okay, so this is how much I will earn if I do this and I do that. Having a physical presence adds that value. However, the controversy around cost, because it's cheaper if you're doing it here. Also, staffing is cheap, unfortunately, for a lot of the Kenyans then who are within that space. they are paid so little compared to their competitors, for example, in South Africa and even in Europe. So they are there, but I agree with the panelist. There is room to then expand and to leverage on the numbers, especially a lot of young people speak good English, also English, as they call it. Do you have another one, or that's it?
It was a comment actually. So in India, there was a lot of West African countries advertising on TV channels like Invest in Africa, West Africa. I think it was Nigeria. So maybe it could also be something that Kenya can look at from a government perspective, that we can advertise something like that too. Because there's a big stereotype, like as I mentioned, when my colleagues and friends came here, they were shocked, like with the communication, the lifestyle and everything. So it's just maybe kind of a marketing campaign to put Kenya out there, basically.
Wait, I'm curious. Before they jump in, what was the, you said, what are they thinking of Kenya or the Kenyan people before they came here?
Well, to be honest, in Bangalore, unfortunately, a lot of the Nigerians have gone there and they deal with drugs.
Yes.
And they are into prostitution. So unfortunately, when they see a Kenyan African, that's all that they can think about. That Africa is just full of drugs and no development. We ride on elephants.
We live in villages, no electricity.
Yes, exactly.
That's stereotype. Okay?
Yeah, so when I've come with both friends and my colleagues, they have been truly impressed. Last year was the most impressive for, as I mentioned, my boss was with an ICT company, so he was very impressed with the communication, from everyone, from the hotel he was staying at with the security guard, all the way up. We came to meet with some banks here, so all the way up to the senior levels. Was very impressed.
I think that's a fantastic idea, which I think has to be part of our marketing strategy. If you look at what Rwanda has done with Arsenal, the whole Visit Rwanda campaign, it has put a very small country almost on a pedestal, and I'm sure that has boosted their business. Now, Rwanda has something called the Rwanda Development Board that coordinates all the activities. And I think Kenya should be, we find in Kenya people work in silos. But if you had a common theme and you go to India and you have a strong Visit Kenya campaign, Kenya's tea, Kenya's coffee, I think our policy, that's something that our policymakers can easily do. And that's a huge market. We're talking of 1.4 billion people. I think that is something Ketrabu, what's the body that's in charge with marketing, can actually, absolutely, we can recommend.
Borrowing from Kigali, speaking of media, you watch CNN from Nairobi today. There was a time Kenya was running ads during the Kibaki administration. I think this is when Balala was the tourism minister. There was a time Kenya did a very big campaign around tourism on CNN. But since then, we've not seen CNN. But today, you watch CNN, you see Rwanda a lot. I think our thinking is we want to get the West. We don't think of Asia, for example. We have a lot of Chinese people who come into the country for the wildebeest migration, for example. A lot of Indians who come for that. But our targets normally is UK, I think, for the pounds, and US for the dollar. And they don't maybe think rupees are important, I don't know. But it's a challenge because within the continent then, the other day, Rwanda hosted a Formula One event. And they're actually bidding to host Formula One Grand Prix race in Rwanda. When I remember when Alfred Mutua was governor, I know Idismas is laughing, but we were very hopeful when he was governor Machakos, and because if you go towards Machakos, for those of you who've gone there are big chunks of land, spaces that you can do so much. And part of his manifesto was building a Formula One track.
I think the silver bullet there is meritocracy. Because you know what Ken has said, I don't know about the budgets because I don't follow soccer or sports a lot, but I don't think it's I think it's a budget that the Kenyan authorities can manage. So it's all about meritocracy, because if you're a public servant of rank, and all you're doing is eyeing the procurement budget, then you not think of these deals with sports giants in the West, because in that kind of arrangement, there's no 10%. So you'd rather buy a piece of land where you get 10%, because these other deals, hakuna 10%, hakuna kitu.
Yeah, there was even a movie that was supposed to be filmed, I think somewhere around Mara, and because of, again, the high cost of allowing people coming into the country with production equipment, film equipment to do anything, they actually moved to South Africa. And there's one, I think, Lion King, I can't remember which one, where a scene was supposed to be actually acted in Kenya. They decided to go to Serengeti, the Tanzanian site. And so it's a very good challenge and a very thought-provoking idea that, okay, how about going to other markets and then promoting Kenya to those markets? We have a lot of elephants, as India does. I have a brother-in-law who normally comes to Kenya, and the first thing he learns, he wants to go to Masai Mara. I have no idea why. He always wants to go there every year, and the lion is just a lion. It doesn't change next year. But the fascination to go see lions and see those kind of things. I don't know whether you have any other comment before we take, that's it? Okay, so we'll take, I think, the last one because of time, and I think there's a hand there. You can help with the mic? I'm sitting on a microphone.
My name is Karen Anyona, and I am a community mobilizer and convener of Athi River Social Justice Center. So when you talk about Athi River and Machakos, I'm right in the middle there. So I hear a lot of that word meritocracy, which is it's very good in philosophy, but as it is with the environment that we have in Kenya, a child in Athi River is fighting for food, for a clean, safe space, while a child in Runda is fighting for grades because they have everything. So where do we now find the balance? Because meritocracy in such a space will just mean recycling of the privileged people. And that is what we are trying to fight as it is as Gen Z society. And another point is when we come to education, India has invested in innovation, research, and development. And what are we doing as Kenya? Are we taking our children to school so that we can get the certificates to apply for these jobs in Indian companies? Or how are we preparing ourselves for industrialization?
Wow. I think we can have the young lady, and then we can combine the questions.
Part of mine goes with hers. The question is, like, we've proven, like, we have talent and knowledge. Like, we've built ChatGPT ideally was built in Kenya, then, like, the data was compiled in Kenya. But I don't think we have the confidence. Let me just read the question and then I'll discuss it. We've proven that we have talent and knowledge, given the capacity to build AI tools like ChatGPT, but the confidence and support system seem to lag behind. How do we change our culture and institutions to nurture bold thinkers, not just skilled workers? In India, in India, they challenged ChatGPT because they built DeepSeek, and DeepSeek really has taken over. Think like with the same skill or whatever, the same,
China.
yeah. And same thing with India, we have Netflix, we have all this Western, what are they called? Prime, Netflix. In India, they get to see all this channels, but in the like Airtel, the one someone mentioned, they get that, but in a different, they change it. So I think we model ourselves to fit in the Western world, but we don't have bold thinkers. She's trying to bring about Runda and at the river, yes? But all of, like right now, we're fighting, there's a lot of unemployment. But why is it employment? Why don't we build, should we be employed as opposed to create something? India has just been creating and creating and creating, and we just rely on things like that. So that was my question.
All right. Do we want to start with the meritocracy?
Okay, I can start with meritocracy. So I don't know whether to approach it as a philosopher or as a practitioner, but everybody in Kenya benefits from meritocracy, whether you as an individual, you embrace meritocracy. Because, okay, there are extreme cases that you've got a student or people under a mango tree in the middle of a forest preparing for exams, but using the laws of averages, using your example, a kid who is in Athi River, right now I understand it's a free education all the way. Well, the university may be having those challenges, and the kid in Runda would be having minimal challenges, but all of them are likely to meet at the University of Nairobi, where the rubber is going to meet the road, and that's where you're going to see meritocracy. Of course, you may have a few going to Ivy League, but still, it doesn't mean that you cannot compete with them. So, in my view, we cannot say that we are not going to embrace meritocracy on account that we don't have the kid in Athi River has got a few challenges. Let's embrace meritocracy so that, and I don't know whether to be politically correct, so that this kid in Runda, who has got capacity, character, and competence, will ensure that this kid from Athi River shines. And maybe Athi River is probably a wrong example to give. Maybe you should have given an example of somebody who's attending classes in the middle of, like there's a place in, I saw footage someplace in Baringo where kids are literally seated on stones. I think it was in Tiati. Maybe that would be a good example, because if you imagine that Athi River is horrible, then it means you've not been to Tiati, and your social justice fight does not reflect the reality on the ground. Thank you.
You want to take the second part of her question?
And maybe just to add on that point, still on meritocracy, Kenya right now we benefit from free primary education, yeah. So if you can also get the free secondary, I think you said it's also free, yeah. No.
And then the university funding model.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know about the secondary, but if you can get the government to make education free all the way to university, or rather subsidize it, I think it will go a long way to making that easier for the disadvantaged kids. Yeah, so maybe if I can move to that question on our education system. Yeah, indeed, we need reforms in our education system. So I think it will call for policy shifts, and how do we make our curriculum be more industry focused? Yeah. So how do we look at what the industry wants and tailor our curriculum to fit or rather to serve the industry? Yeah, because currently we might get a lot of information that we don't need in the industry, or rather it's not really value adding to the industry. So it's good to align what we're taught in the universities also with the industry. Yeah.
That's a really good question, Karen. And by the way, Karen is running to be the next MCA of Athi River. Okay. So please give her give her every support that you need. And you asked a fantastic question about education. And it's also tied to Vivian's question about our culture. We always assume that the future has a solution, and we don't look back into our history. And education used to be a great equalizer in Kenya. It no longer is. In fact, I got the results of KCPE 1988, the top 100 results. These are people now who are turning 50 this year. These were when they were teenagers. Listen to this. The top student, 1988, Gilbert Nyasoko from St. Mary's Mosocho. Top student in Kenya. Number 2, Baraza Bidanya Kilimani Jr. That was actually my primary, that's in Karen. So a student in Kisii is number 1. A student in Karen is number 2. Number 3, Benedict Maungu Township. Township is Machakos. Number 4, Anthony Kiragu Harambe, that's Nairobi. Number 5, Lynn Ovino, Our Lady of Mercy, South B. Number 6, Joseph Minor, St. Martin's, Moranga. Number 7, Polycarp Obino, St. Mary's, Mosocho. Number 9, Matthew Adegu Mululu, that's in Kakamega. Number 10, Andrew Philip Ngetich Kipsigak, that's in Nandi. So you can imagine the top 10 students were from different parts, both the rich and the not so rich. So education used to be an equalizer. And that's why I say we need to look into our history and ask, when did education stop being an equalizer? Is it, if I went to St. Mary's Mosocho today, can I be guaranteed I can be top student in Kenya?
Yes.
Without the bias. In Kisii, you know. And that's a problem. It's no longer, now it's becoming the wealthy are becoming wealthier and having more access, the poor are being condemned. So again, that's why I keep saying, part of India's greatness has been to look into its history, because there are sometimes Kenya has done wonderful things and we forget. And we're trying to look for solutions when we already fixed them. There was a time the bus route system worked perfectly. You'd wait here and at 11 o'clock on the dot, it'd be perfect. You'd go to a hospital and you'd get treated and you'd not pay anything. So sometimes as we look into external solutions, I don't think we do enough of our history to ask, is there a time it ever worked? And for education, that's 1988. And that was a great equalizer when somebody from Kisii can beat a student from Karen. The question is, what has happened? I like the free education, but I think it has also diluted the quality. I don't think we are providing enough funding. I don't think we are supporting public schools. And people now don't want to take their kids to public schools. So I think it's, again, looking in our history and fixing the things that once worked and asking ourselves, did they work? What went? Where did the rain start beating us? And actually fixing that. Yeah. I think it's about wealth creation, the perceptions of wealth creation. And in America, it's very clear. The way you become wealthy is you get an idea, build a startup, work on it, list it on the stock exchange. That's the American philosophy, where we have your Mark Zuckerberg, who was 1 year ahead of us. He said he'll not graduate from Harvard because he has a good Facebook idea. He'll list it on the stock exchange. He'll become wealthy. In Kenya, it goes back to what this person was saying. Our wealth creation is tied towards government spending, procurement, where a student thinks about, how do I become a procurement manager at KEMSA? That's how you become wealthy in Kenya. So you need to go back to sealing these loopholes so that a young person in Kenya says, I want to have a startup. I want this startup to be the next big thing. I want to have a unicorn in the next 5 years. It's already happening in some of these hubs, but it's not to the scale that you see in Israel. You see in Estonia is such a small country, but Estonia has more unicorns per capita than the rest of the world. They have the home of Skype, the home of Bolt, the home of, so many. It's a tiny, tiny country. So I think it's just, again, showing people the perfect way to creation is through innovation, entrepreneurship, and when you become successful, maybe we didn't talk about it so much with Dennis, philanthropy. Philanthropies, you see it big in India. Whether you talk about the Chandaria families in Kenya, they're big on philanthropy. the Madhavans in Uganda, the Bakresas, in as much as they make a lot of money, a lot of that money is pumped back into philanthropy, into community. So I think it's that vision, that cycle of hard work ethic, innovation, entrepreneurship. You make it part of that, what you get, you plow back to the community, help the person who's below, what Americans will say, paying it forward. We don't have, in fact, in anything, sometimes in Kenya, when you're successful, you want to shut the ladder that got you there. So I think those are some of the lessons that I think we can build in terms of that.
We actually had a show, I think sometime this week, and I want to give you some highlights. Maybe this will help in expanding your thought process around education. Because in our show, we've talked about capitation, we've talked about the CBCs, now CBE, whatever. We've had so many conversations. We've hosted ministry officials. We've hosted experts in the education sector. And the frustration is real. And the reality for us in Kenya, unfortunately, education is not our leveler anymore. That's why when Dismas gave the example of a child in Tiati, in West Pokot, and I've been in those places where you almost don't imagine you're actually in Kenya. The level of illiteracy is so deep that it will take another 50 years to get those people to the level where Nairobi is, for example. And we're still within the same country. And so when you look at the different changes that are going on in the ministry, you will need to take a step back, because the president the other day made a comparison that we need to be where Singapore is. You guys had that statement, right? Now, I don't know about you guys. I've gone to Singapore. You look at that country and how it has developed, and you look at everything that goes on in that country. First, before our plane landed, we were given a piece of paper to sign. And I remember asking the hostess, what is this? Why are we signing this? And they follow the rule to the extent it's been ingrained in them. Number one, you just can't walk around chewing gum. So the chewing gum I had in the nini, I put it in a tissue and I left it there, because you will be arrested. If you are found with drugs, even a pellet of a banned drug, you can actually get executed. So you are told, the law is very clear. By the time you land, it's been ingrained. And through the education system, if you now compare the education system, because the comparison between Kenya and Singapore is we gained independence around the same time. And we were all at the same level. But if you now compare Kenya to Singapore, Kenya is still third world. We are still in that space where we are thinking of developing. They developed a long time ago. But then if you look at the foundations, what they decided then to do, and when you think of education, Singapore treats the education system as a development tool. Kenya treats its education system as a process to get jobs. And that's why our fathers and our mothers and their fathers and mothers, they were going through school. And even when I was going through school, and the ultimate goal is to pass exams because of that grading system, so that you can get employment in the public service. And so the belief was, if you're working for government, apart from having job security, wewe sasa ndio uko na kazi. But a parent could not imagine you're going through school and then you're saying you want to start a business. From where? And so the Singapore system, if I'm going to read a few notes that we discussed in the show, for purposes of time, I'll try to go through this very, very quickly. Why the education system works better. They structured their education system to the needs of the future and the national policy, and where the country needed to be. If you trace our schooling system, and sorry to take you, you're Gen Z, I think, eh? When is Gen Z? Huh? Okay, so I don't know whether, I'm trying to trace that report very quickly. I don't know if any of you has actually, because you need to do research and look at where we started. So when Kenya gained its independence, we prioritized education after independence, but what guided the system? What guided the system was a report called the Ominde Commission 1964. Now, in that report, it aimed to Africanize the curriculum, okay? so that they can expand access, so that now people can get educated, because the colonizers didn't want us to get educated, they didn't want us to get informed. So from the report, what they wanted is they wanted everybody to have access to education. Number two, it was then to remove the racial segregation in schools, because there are schools you couldn't go to because of the white man, blah, blah, blah. So when they expanded that, we never then sat down to rethink, okay, now that we are independent, we need to start thinking, where does Kenya need to be in the next 30 years, 40 years? We didn't have leadership that was thinking far ahead than to create a curriculum that is need-based, okay? So right now, the world is big on IT, and technology is changing everything. Technology, ChatGPT that you referred to, is replacing a lot of jobs, such that if I'm in the newsroom as an editor, for example, I don't need to get a reporter coming to me with a script from the field. I don't need to use my brains and scratch my brains a lot and spend 15, 20 minutes to try and edit the grammar, correct this. I just need to copy that script, put it on Grammarly, or put it on ChatGPT, give it instructions. This is what I want to get from this. And within 2-3 seconds, I have it. So what's the future of journalists within my space? Yet, we have university students who are today enrolling to do mass communication, to do broadcast journalism. And I ask, so you have 4 mainstream media houses that every year they're actually firing people because the space is becoming smaller, the cake is becoming smaller. So you're going to university, you are studying the same thing I studied 20 years ago. What is radio? What is TV? And you're still stuck on traditional media, where today you can actually start your own media channel on TikTok. Today, you don't need NTV, KTN, Citizen, KBC, and all the other stations to go live at JKIA to report to the rest of the country what is happening at JKIA, the body of Raila Odinga has arrived. Actually, a lot of the action was on TikTok. Footage that you can't see on mainstream, on TikTok, you're scrolling through the lives. People were actually filming this live. So technology has changed, but we've not adapted our education system and curriculum to the future needs. Today, you have schools, and not all schools, but today, if you look at public schools, no school is teaching children coding. This is only happening in private schools, privately owned, where you have 15-year-olds, 10-year-olds now who are learning coding. But you go to a public, sorry? It's because we don't have a structure. The TikTok we are using in Kenya is not the same TikTok. Where is TikTok coming from, by the way? You know, it's China. But you know, if you go to China, you try to access their TikTok, it's about science, it's technology, it's very intellectually stimulating. But Ebu, go to our TikTok here in Kenya. What do you see? Now, let's just be real. What do you see? You see young ladies twerking. You see, you know, I always get so fascinated. You see a lot of young people, they're not sleeping. I go to sleep, they're alive. I wake up in the morning, they're alive. During the day, I'm watching my phone. I'm like, when do these people even sleep? And all they're doing is tap my screen, tap screen. Send me a lion, send me I don't know what. That's what you're using TikTok for. It's a form, if you're bored and you want to be entertained, just go to TikTok. But in China, young kids, 10-year-olds, are going to TikTok. They are doing science experimentations. They are creating robots. That's what they are doing. Because the education system, I'm so passionate about education. That's why I can go on and on and on about this. Because it's a Christian school. Yeah. I will let the Ivy League speak, but I'll summarize by I'll summarize by saying this. The bottom line for me is simple. Our education system is largely focused on academics rather than thinking industrial, thinking technical, thinking technology. Our education system has been created in a way, and this is very deliberate, by the way. It's not accidental, very deliberate. Our education system is creating job seekers, not job creators. That's why you're talking about somebody coming from out of the country, from another system, and they're thinking of starting their own company. Why? Because the system they've gone through teaches them that you can actually create opportunities around you, you can leverage on ideas and create employment around it, so that you don't have to go with your masters to stay 5 years, 10 years waiting for a job. Whatever skills you've learned, you can put them to practice and actually earn more money than the person waiting to get a government job. I think I'll let them answer.
Before the Ivy League come in, and I don't know about your experience. Where I work, and it's a serious challenge, you can get somebody who has a bachelor's of arts in journalism, mass communication and everything, yet they cannot do a simple press release. They cannot write a news release. And then when you go through the transcripts, it's very impressive. So we begin to wonder, this chap has been in the university for 4 years. Yeah. So now, then when you don't get a job, you begin to blame Raila Odinga and President Ruto. Now, and I think you've raised a very fundamental point, is that when you have this Ivy League thinking, wherever you're walking around town, you are looking for a problem, not to catalyze it, but to offer a solution. Like, for instance, yeah. You know, you spoke about critical thinking, so that I finish this point before the Ivy League. If you bring an entrepreneur inside this room, they can actually look at maybe the structure of this place, and they'll identify a problem and offer a solution. But because now we've been trained to look for jobs or wait for jobs, so the first thing when you complete university is your father or mother is asking, do we have a tall neighbor somewhere or a tall relative somewhere? Yes. Your uncle is the head of human resource at Kenya Power. Basi unapatiwa kazi huko. Now, also then it has raised a fundamental question. Where would a rational young girl spend time twerking and posting those clips instead of trying to identify problems in the society? I met several young girls. One is as young as 19. She's in her first year, but she started a company where she recruits maids and trains them on how to take care of, I don't know, it's called gentric something. Those people are very old. So she trains them on how to take care of elderly women. And she's still first year. So I don't think when she completes a course, she'll be looking for a job. Because she will have a business which is running. And also this Ivy League guy, that's how he started Mentoria.
Yeah, thank you. Just to summarize, for me, identifying a key problem in the society or in the country, like a true need in the country, a demand, I think that's the basis. So if you can identify a problem, and it's indeed a big, like a pain, it could be a pain point, a challenge in the country, and you have a passion in that space, in that field, I think you may be surprised that can go into a multi-million-dollar business employing thousands of people. But also, just to add, it's important to, from my opinion, just to spend 2 or 3 years working for an organization just to build networks, polish up on some few skills, such as maybe if it's accounting, if it's principles of marketing, the legal side. And you see that in the company you have all these skill sets and departments. So spending 2 or 3 years is not bad just to polish up on some of those. Like myself and Ken, we spent 4 years in banking. Then we also went ahead and spent some time in consulting for other people. And then the Port of Mombasa. So I think that has shaped my career into consulting, and yeah, also like in my own startups. I think I built a lot of skills, just also working for other people. Yeah. So over to you, Ken.
I think that's a really good question, Vivian, you asked. And I think the world is becoming more open to your ideas than possibly in the past. I think all of us here are millennials. I'd like to imagine we're millennials, Gen Z. And honestly, if you're told our education system at that time, primary, it was very, these were the days of corporal punishment. So you had really the fear of teachers in a very unhealthy way. Today, I think the Gen Zs and the Alphas, education has become more sort of conversational. Back in our day, it was really, you asked a question, put your hand up, answer. There was no debate and discuss. In a way, I think the world has opened up, which is a good thing for especially the Gen Zs to take advantage. And it leads to what this person was saying about critical thinking. I think when you have an environment now where it's all about ideas and problem solving, you're able to engage in a much more wonderful way. Some of the new jobs that are coming up, content creators, social media analysts, these roles did not exist many years ago. So I think it's using the tools. When I remember seeing the Berlin Marathon about 2 weeks ago, which the Kenyan won, Sebastian Sawe, and I remember the commentator saying how his parents constantly told him to join the police, the Kenya police, because there are many benefits. But he really felt athletics was his path. And you can imagine in one race, what he's getting is probably what you'd get if he was a police. So I think it's that openness, what I call the empire state of mind, to say, okay, this is what worked for my parents' generation, but the world has changed. I can be an actor, I can be an actress, I can be a content creator. So I think now with TikTok, with internet, now you're able to benchmark with what's my peer in Australia doing, what's my peer in New York doing, and you'll realize, funny enough, you're just one direct message to those people. With tools like LinkedIn, you can actually DM almost anybody in the world, start a conversation and ask, wow, how did you start this startup, across the world? So I think it's using the tools. I think you have more tools. I think it's having an open mind, having hope, don't despair. Sometimes I think there's an element of despair when everybody feels that you can't, there's a glass ceiling. So I think it's hope, utilizing all the resources available to you, utilizing the networks available to you, and you'll be surprised. You can actually go so much further than those ones who came ahead of you.
I think we want to wind up at that point. You have a question? A burning one? Okay, anyone with a burning question? But, dear sister, do not despair. You still have I think because these conversations are happening now, it will shape the future leaders, how they think. I was shocked the other day to learn that a lot of the people doing great things have actually left this country and they've gone to other countries. For example, the engineer was behind the tube in the UK. He's actually a Kenyan professor. He's the one who designed that. And the same design went to which country? There's some country where I went to, I can't remember. So the people who say that you learn a skill, you earn forever. So the question then is, and I did, and we sat down with the former PS Bitang Demo, who's into IT and technology, and we were having lunch, and we were just talking, and he said, Dennis, the biggest predicament, especially today, and his desire is to see a lot of young people open up their minds, because we don't have a lot of exposure. And he said, if I give If in Naruma and I say, I'm giving you 1 million shillings, and I ask, what kind of business will you open with the 1 million shillings? And they said, you will get very generic answers. One, open an M-Pesa kiosk, buy bales, Zamtumba. What else? Buy land, buy cereals and sell cereals. It's the very basic stuff. And he said, look, everybody is thinking the same way. And that's why you walk around different spaces, everybody is copying every person. So this one is selling clothes, the other one is selling clothes, the other person is selling clothes, the same way. And so we need a rethink, like you're saying, it's a mindset issue. Forget culture, because we were born in this country, we were born into this culture, so there's nothing we can do about it. But it's you to then think and change your mindset and try get as much exposure as you can. And a lot of young people are doing that. I met a young lady, I was sitting with this young lady, we were going to Cape Town, and I didn't know she was Kenyan. You know how you get into this place, you are not talking to each other, you unaenda unakaa. So at some point we started having a conversation. I realized, oh, you're also from Kenya. Okay, so where are you going? And she told me she was going to an expo in Cape Town, and she was too young. And I asked, okay, so you've come with that team? No, I'm going alone, and then I'm going to spend 2-3 days there, then come back. It's like, you're going alone? Like, yeah, I travel actually alone. I asked, why? And she told me, I want to learn new things away from my village. I want to expand my mind. So she saves money, not to do anything, but just to get an air ticket. And she was telling me how you can actually get a cheap air ticket. I was like, wow. I told her, you can actually do a podcast. Educate us, people like us who don't have an idea, and tell people when are the seasons, when can you buy an air ticket, when can you do this, when you can. And she's like, I'm already doing that. She showed me her TikTok account. Very young lady, I think 22 or something, 23 there. And I was looking at her content, and she was talking about different places she's traveled. So she's saying, if you go to this town, this is how much Airbnbs cost. This is where you can get the best Airbnbs. And I found myself consuming her content. Then I juxtaposed her content with the content of 90% others, where every time I flip is somebody turning to show me their back. And I'm thinking, you get. So it has nothing to do with culture. These are two people raised within the same culture, but have a totally different mindset. This expo is a fintech expo, where she knew about the expo. I asked her, so where are you going to spend your time? Oh, there's an Airbnb, I've stayed before, that's where I'm going. Nobody sponsored her. It's her self-sponsoring. So when 90% are looking for the sponsors, nakupiga sherehe, somebody is thinking, there is no way I was born in this village, I go to school in this village, get married in this village, take care of my kids in this village, then die and get buried in this village. No. So a lot of young people are saying, no, if our education system is not giving us what we are looking for, then I can go to the internet. You can actually go to Pakistan, go to India, go to America from your bedroom using the internet. And there are infinite possibilities when you get into that space.
Then it's actually, there's a saying in my mother tongue that if you don't travel, you may think your mom is the best cook.
I think at this point I'll hand it over to Ken.
Thank you so much, Dennis, Dismas, George. Thank you to the ladies and gentlemen here. Very good questions. I've learned so much as we were giving insights. I've also learned so much, and I think the idea from here is let's keep engaging. We've gone way beyond our time, and I think that's testament to how much there was. I was planning by 11 we'd be done, but you can see it's almost 12:30, and I'm like, wow, that was good content, and I think we've learned a lot. So feel free to network amongst yourselves, take each other's contacts. Let's keep a conversation, and I think this will be something that it's already been recorded, so we'll share it with you on our social media handles. And if you have any question, feel free to send an email. You can take my contacts after this. And really, thank you so much to everyone. And I think maybe we can have a round of applause to the panelists here. Asanteni sana, and enjoy the long weekend.